So, welcome back everybody from the lunch break here at BioStock Life Science Summit 2019. We're webcasting live from Medicon Village in Lund, Sweden, and I must say I'm very pleased to see that you all came back from lunch. I hope you're invigorated and that your tummies are full, because now we have a quite exciting afternoon ahead of us. And it's going to kick off with a panel session, and I'm very happy to be able to introduce my three panelists here. This panel session is called Investing in Innovation from Discovery to Market. And the experts that we have invited for this panel is Mattias Häggblom of Swedbank Robur Medica, it's Daniel Bolanovsky from Arctic Aurora Life Science, and we also have Klaus Johansen from Danske Bank Asset Management. So I'm just going to sit down and let it rip. First of all, thank you all for coming today. It's a great pleasure to have you here. I thought we could start off like in the last panel with a short introduction of yourself and who you're working for and what you do. We can start with you, Mattias.
Sure. Mattias Häggblom, work for Swedbank Robur, manage our global healthcare fund called Medica. Swedbank Robur, for those who don't know us, is Sweden's largest mutual fund manager. I think we have $70 billion in equities globally. We're active managers. Half of our money, if not more, is globally invested. The other half is more regional. The healthcare fund is $1 billion, so it's a small fish in the sea. But we have healthcare across the vast majority of our products, so 10-15% of our assets are typically invested in healthcare. I'm a biologist by training, ended up in the sell side covering Nordic life science stocks for 18 years, moved over to the buy side to manage investments 3.5 years ago, and happy to be here.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, so Daniel Bolanovsky, work for Arctic Fund Management and the life science fund Arctic Aurora Life Science. So we specialize in therapeutics mainly, highly diverse, differentiated and innovative therapies is sort of our niche, what we like to see in our investments. So myself, I'm a biotech engineer by training, and also a business degree, which suited me pretty well. Biotech from the standpoint of all the new technologies that has enabled a lot of new, very interesting clinical results. So yeah, exciting times for us.
Thank you. And Klaus, you have been traveling from across the sea today.
Yes, my name is Klaus Johansen from Danske Bank Asset Management. I'm part of a team. We are 16 people. We are investing in both European and global equities, and we have between 11 and 12 billion euros under management. And I'm the healthcare specialist, so I'm the guy who travels around the world and talking to doctors, visiting companies, and going to these conferences to meet companies and doctors and get deep insight.
Great, thank you very much. I thought we should start with talking about the Nordic ecosystem and the Nordic investor climate with a global outlook. Like you said, Klaus, you travel the world and you go to conferences and so on. My first question is, what's the view of the Nordic countries in the sense of in a global competitive landscape within life science?
I think there's tremendous enthusiasm surrounding science coming out from the Scandinavian countries. I still think it's a bit overlooked. I think there's a lot of excitement and a lot of money flowing in the US ecosystem, but I think the money lacks a little bit more in the European and Scandinavian system.
And Mattias, like you said, you have a global outlook as well. You invest globally. What's your take on how well are the Nordics holding up in the global landscape?
Well, I think an event like this speaks for itself. You know, there's a lot of companies, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of entrepreneurs. The challenge most of us face, and I say us because we feel part of it, is the funding gap between US companies and European companies, not only Scandi-based. So a large US IPO is typically a few $100 million. as a starting point for a Scandi-based biotech companies is vastly smaller amount than that. So that's the challenge. But the ideas, the number of flagship companies like Genmab, Sobi, Oncopeptides, a growing list of large companies that have been able to attract investors from a global base speaks for itself. The science is good. It's just that funding gap that is challenging.
Daniel, what's your take? Correct me if I'm wrong, but Arctic Aurora is Norwegian-based?
Arctic Fund Management is a Norwegian company.
Okay.
Arctic Aurora Life Science is Stockholm-based. That's our
sorry.
subsidiaries where we sit. But we are a global fund as well. So we look at everything from a global perspective. So quality-wise, there are quite a few, as Matthias mentioned, quite a few interesting names for us. We tend to invest slightly later when we see some clinical efficacy. For example, that's a sweet spot for us where we can perhaps be a little bit ahead of generalists, but we're not a VC company.
No.
So there are a few opportunities, but there's also sort of a gap between the promising names, VC territory, and those that have come through the Oncopeptides and the Genmabs, for example, that are relatively established and have at least $1 billion worth of market cap. Gap there, and capitalization is part of that issue, I think. So VCs are doing a pretty good job in discovering new interesting assets. We are probably doing a good job in finding the more mature ones in between there. Just getting companies into the next stage is challenging, and it appears to be easier in the US. There are more crossover funds that can bridge that gap.
So obviously there is like you said, it's a big difference between sort of in valuation, of course, but also in the capital flowing in the markets between the US and Europe, especially Scandinavian. So, but could you say that Nordic science or Scandinavian-born science is world-class science at a bargain price? Is that correct?
Quality-wise, I agree with you. Quality-wise, there's no difference. I think we're ahead of a lot of countries, region. Of course, the US is always going to be best in terms of quantity, so that you have so much things coming from the universities there. Per capita, I guess we're almost as good. But again, it's bridging that gap between good academic ideas and building successful companies. For all that matters, I mean, a lot of the interesting ideas in the Nordic countries, my feel is that they're actually picked up by pharma companies before they're even allowed to, be developed by entrepreneurs. So I think there's a lot of Swedish, Danish, Norwegian-born ideas that never make it to listed companies, for example, here locally. And we have a lot of good people that are active in the international pharma and biotech companies that are from here. So competence-wise, it's really good. We just need to be better at taking care of those assets and build good companies around them.
Klaus, would you say that there's a difference if we look at, for example, Sweden and Denmark as two different countries? Would you say that there's a difference in between those? In how do we take care of the science coming or the ideas coming out?
I think that's a very difficult question to answer, how you actually do in Sweden and Denmark. But at least in Denmark, you have had some foundations supporting some very big companies like Lundbeck and Novo Nordisk. So they've had, let's say, some stability in the shareholder base to think very long term. And that could be probably the biggest, let's say, obstacle in the Scandinavian region, finding patient capital that are patient and that can take time and use that time to develop the right products and scale them up so that they can be commercially viable.
And then looking at the Swedish market, we have a fairly unique market here with a lot of retail investors, smaller investors that are happy to throw their capital into early science and early funding. Is that all? Everything about that good? What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's certainly problematic, or could be problematic the day, we're at zero interest rates around the world, and we've had, no one remembers the last bear market, but there was actually one before. Some people don't remember that, but retail investor base is great, and I'd say the retail investor base has become much more sophisticated the last decade or so. There's so much information available, online and webcasts. Before you had to go physically and visit companies and to medical meetings. There's so much you can pick up online today. That said, the ability an institutional investor have to become long-term supporter, even beyond a financial crisis or what have you, it should not be underestimated. The retail money, to some extent at least, will, if not diminish, it will be smaller. People will take out their money out of the stock market. So, it's you have to start somewhere. If you don't find a VC, if you don't attract an institutional investor, what can you do? Well, you can start maybe with a retail support fund base, so to say, to do the proof of concept study or phase 1 or preclinical. But then most people here in the room and probably will start to look for larger pockets to accomplish more of their ideas, and that's challenging because just like the gentleman here next to me says, it's typically a starting point where, in terms of market cap, we prefer to invest due to liquidity reasons and so on. So it's difficult. You can see it from both points. There's no simple solution to it.
Did you want to add?
Some of the major limitations with this sort of open market structure is that capital raises for secondaries seem to be very painful here, whereas in the U.S., even in these good times, whereas in the U.S. it's a normal part of the company, of say a biotech company's life cycle. You raise money and you do it all the time. You try to be opportunistic about it. Here, I heard dilution being mentioned in the last panel, and that's not usually never heard that as a problem in U.S. capital raises. You create value through the money you raise, and that's to the benefit of everyone, even those that are maybe diluted at a certain transaction. So hopefully you gain value when you lose your company share. That seems to be a harder concept to grasp here for some reason. No easy fix for that, but I guess you need stronger investors to be in that ride.
So there's a knowledge gap, you would say, in sort of the general process, how life science companies evolve?
I'd say it's a culture thing, but we're seeing progress here. 10 years ago, a biotech company could not raise capital overnight. They had to go through a typically fairly challenging rights issue process, not fully guaranteed, and the stock price went down 40% during that 3-month period, and no one gained from that. Whereas in the US, they bang overnight, funding is fixed, we move on, we create value. But we're starting to see more of that, those kind of pipe situations or overnight fundings, directed issues, here in Scandinavia as well, which I think is beneficial for the vast majority. There's typically a focus around dilution rather than value creation. Is the glass half full or half empty? In America, you typically in this sector see it as the possibilities rather than the downside from actions like that. But I think it's starting to change. We've seen a number of larger transactions that not have gone through the rights issue process. Not to say that we should not have rights issues, but there's opportunities for both. One size does not fit all.
That's true, and seem to be that having a direct issue, capital injection is generally viewed as something quite positive, even here, if there is a good investor base going in. However, whereas the normal share issue, which everyone should expect actually, seems to be like a red flag for many retail investors as well, to dump their shares. So speaking of red flags, would like to know a little bit about you guys, what you consider to be red flags when you choose where to invest. Is there a common denominator that which is like, okay, I won't go there? Daniel, you would like to start?
Oh, there are so many, but I mean, trying to look at it from the positive angle. As I mentioned, we like to look at stuff with a lot of innovation height. So if you don't have that, if you have a concept which is similar to what other people are developing, you might have an issue, especially if you're a small biotech company going against a group of large pharma names. They tend to cluster around these very attractive targets, and suddenly you have 5 new migraine drugs on the market at the same time that are doing almost exactly the same thing, for example, or the immuno-oncology drugs. So you probably don't want to develop a new PD-1 inhibitor as a small Swedish biotech company, for example. And then, have a pretty transparent process and with your investors and what you're doing, clear goals. Even if you would fail, and that happens, you can still rebuild companies. It's easier if you have money to do it. And again, back to capital that you need injected. Just overall, a very sound drug developing profile. For example, if you go into biotech and have good people with a sort of a global reach, not only local people. There could be very good Swedish, Danish, Norwegian drug developers, but there are also a lot of very good people around the world that can give advice. So we'd like to see, for example, international board as early as possible in these young companies to give proper advice on how to go at the global market.
Yes.
I have a simple rule. If I ever get into IR consultancy or so, I'll give it for free here. Under promise, over deliver. It's very easy to say, but it's difficult to execute on. So one of my red flags is companies who promise a lot, and when I meet with them 6 months or 12 months later, they've not accomplished anything on what they promised. That's not a good starting point of building relationships, and we're here for the long term. At Swedbank Gruber, typically a starting investment for us is 3 to 5 year horizon. That's how we tend to think about, at least, we'd love to stay longer, but we're not in for the short term, like next quarter or next 2 quarters or so. So building relationships, starts with trust, and then you can't promise too much. Rather under promise and then over deliver. And then, second point I make is I always get a bit nervous when companies are very explicit in press releases, but they never show up on medical meetings which are relevant for their therapeutic area where they operate. Because, in the end of the day, those who's going to prescribe the medicine, if it's a therapeutic, it's the doctors in that field. And those are the ones you're going to entertain and get on board. And the financial community is going to realize if there's a disconnect between that fairly soon. So those would be two my examples.
Mm. Klaus, any red flags?
I completely agree with Matthias. It's about relationship and building trust, and having, let's say, good relationship with the medical community. It's getting the right people on board and have a very open dialogue and very transparent dialogue with the investment community, because you have to deliver and you have to continuously deliver if you want to attract new money. So it's about building trust and delivering results.
So look out for the companies who are just going to the partnering conferences and not to the medical conferences. So when you are invested, there are situations where there are more or less binary outcomes. How do you feel about those cases? Klaus, you can start. Sorry.
We are, let's say, typical investing in companies with have profit and they are profitable. So we don't really invest in specific binary events, but we take it into consideration, and we do due diligence on, let's say, both the safety and the efficacy, and also let's say how it is being perceived in the medical community. So that's very important to get a feeling for how these results are interpreted. And we use, of course, a bunch of experts within the specific area. So it's really hard to, let's say, just boil it down to binary events. We don't do that. We do investment, so we have to have an opinion about if it will work or if it doesn't work.
Matthias?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree that if I could choose, I'd avoid any binary event because I think they're typically, asymmetrical risk reward is typically not very favorable. If the shit hits the fan, stock is down 80-90%. If it's good data, it's up maybe 30-40%, but that may be a starting point for a few 100% of value creation. So, if I could prefer, I'd probably avoid binary events, but that would then have to mean that a lot of companies and situations that are not as mature, that we have seen, proof of concept data or are never going to be investable for us. We tend to think that we have a preference for more mature companies as well, indeed. But if there's been a good, solid, well-designed phase 2 trial with a similar design into phase 3, I can be I can be confident invested. There was a US company, Horizon Pharma, with a drug called teprotumumab for an inflammatory fibrotic eye disease, which one of my few exceptions, very solid phase 2 data published in New England Journal of Medicine, an overpowered phase 3 trial that I was one of a few times I felt very comfortable that the data is going to come out favorable, and it did, even better than the phase 2, which is an exception. Be prepared. An advice I'd give to investors in this field is that do a lot of work prior to the data outcome. Typically, companies are very transparent about their events that they're expecting in the next 12 months. So do the homework before, because then you have potentially an information benefit once the data is out to better judge if data is good and if not. Rather than trying to run towards every fire there is, because there's always a fire. And particularly yesterday, we had a surprising event, aducanumab being filed for Alzheimer's disease in Biogen. If you didn't know what A-beta hypothesis was before, there was no way you could win yesterday, although we're not trying to win every day. But, be prepared. Because once data is out, if you're better informed, you can make a better judged investment. It's my view.
Mm.
Yeah, so personally, I like binary events myself, but there are a few sort of qualitative assessments, like Matthias mentioned, that you need to be confident in the read-through from previous studies, for example. And if you are, there's and you can do good job in managing a portfolio, but that's another important point. We're managing a portfolio, so we're not taking a single bet. And even with the best intentions, doing our best analysis, you can sometimes fail on these binary events. But if you have 30 such events, say over a year, and 1 or 2 fails, then hopefully the other ones will be successful. Hopefully, so far we've done pretty well. But it takes a lot of research. You need to talk to a lot of people. You need to read a lot. You need to understand the potential pitfalls. If you do that, then I'd say you can comfortably invest in binary events, but as long as you make several such bets, not single ones.
The classic, sorry.
I think the retail investor and also the professional investors just need to look at the probabilities ahead of a phase 1 that it will, let's say, have a positive readout and will actually reach the market. That's only 1 out of 10 that will actually reach the market. So the odds, even though that you have good data, they could be pretty tough going forward and going into a phase 2 and to replicate the very good phase 1 data. So I would just advise investors and people to look at the data and then make up your mind and try to figure out how good are these data. But it's difficult.
It is for sure, especially if you're from a layman perspective. So be informed and spread your risks. That's a pretty much classic advice on that. So if we look ahead, I know that our future is getting short. It's only a couple of minutes left, but if you could each give me one of your insights into the future. Matthias, what's coming next? Trending technologies, for example.
Well, it's going to be very boring, but because it's been said before, but I think what's happening in gene therapies is actually quite interesting right now. We had the first quarterly sales for Novartis Zolgensma, a gene therapy for SMA, a rare disease, but with devastating outcome that until a few years ago was not treatable, and now they have very promising data. They sold for $160 million first quarterly sales. I think consensus expectations was $100 million. My point being, this is not only working in theory, this is actually working commercially, which is critically important if more money is going to flow into this field. So, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in gene therapy. I think that would be my sort of boring because it's not unique, but it has so many applications. Given that it happens in parallel with our better understanding for genetics and disease targets. So that plus, I'll throw in another one, brief one. The US drug pricing in particular is probably not sustainable. So companies need from day one to think about their pricing strategy, because before it was just a tweet by Hillary Clinton back in August 2015, and there's still 4 years later an overhang around US drug pricing that is not benefiting a lot of the biopharma companies in the US. So think about your pricing strategy early on is probably my advice there.
Thank you.
So I'd like to make a pretty bold suggestion and suggest 2 therapeutic fields that are considered historically very difficult, very expensive, especially for small companies to develop drugs in. That's cardiovascular disease and central nervous system disorders, which has been almost dormant. A lot of big pharma companies shut down their R&D operations in these fields. And suddenly now with new technology, like Matthias mentioned, in our gene therapy RNA technologies, suddenly we're starting to see that even small-ish biotech companies can do cardio drugs and CNS drugs, which is very exciting because we need new innovations in those fields. Those aren't mentioned a lot. We still, and rare diseases is going to be massive in terms of what they can do for patients. In SMA, that's like going from 0 to 100 in treatment effect almost. And credit to Biogen, by the way. Their earlier drug in SMA now is starting to show really interesting results. If you can treat these kids from almost at birth, you're almost at getting these kids that will live until 2-3 years old now suddenly develop like normal children. That's a huge progress.
That's fantastic. Klaus, any final?
I completely agree with gene therapy, and I think I'm also looking forward to some allogeneic stem cell transplant in myeloma, for instance. We will probably have data within the next 12 to 24 months that could be pretty interesting. We have CAR T treatments today, but that could actually revolutionize the treatment. I would also look into specific antibodies. We'll see a number of data coming out the next 12 to 15 months, and we'll see how they work from the efficacy-wise and also safety-wise. So that's going to be pretty interesting.
So that's a number of tips for all of you out there. It's been a pleasure having you today. We could have used more time, but I guess if anyone can want to try to ask you some questions about your strategies, they can do that in the break later. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's give him a warm hand. Vi kan bara rulla av scenen. Tack. So. And we're almost on time still. Our next speaker, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Per Persson, CEO of Acarix. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Right. So I think that the one thing that I really took away from this was a very few words, and that was a statement about a few $100 investments. That's kind of the language that I think I would like to hear. So my name is Per Persson. I'm here very happy and proud to both represent and present for a company called Acarix. And I have the opportunity to kick off this afternoon, and within the coming next 10 minutes, I'm just going to take you through a journey of, like many of the other companies that are presenting here today, represents a very long time of innovation. And in 10 minutes, I really hope to make you feel comfortable what it means to work in the field of ruling out cardiovascular disease. we are a small Swedish company, and we have been based on a technology that was developed in Denmark quite some years ago. In very short words, and I'll show you a video in just a few seconds, we are actually working with an acoustic technology by which we're able to listen to your heart and then determine whether you are suffering potentially from cardiovascular disease, which means that you have lesions in your coronary vessels. And we were put on the stock market in the very late part of 2016. And right now, to speak about some of the other languages, we are in the emission process with the rights issue. And I'm happy to have an opportunity to speak to all of you after my little presentation. 1 minute of your time, which I think will save me about 20 slides in terms of presentation, just to show you to a nice pitching elevator music what our technology is all about.
The CADScor system uses innovative acoustic technology, ultra-sensitive phonocardiography, to listen to the entire heart, from the heart valves to the blood in the coronary arteries. When arteries narrow due to CAD, turbulence may occur in the bloodstream. Turbulence-related sounds, murmurs, can be an important indicator of significant CAD. After the recording phase, the audio is filtered, segmented and analysed using state-of-the-art algorithms to identify abnormal sound patterns. The calculated CAD score is then presented on the display. The entire CAD test, including score calculation, takes less than 10 minutes. The CADScor system, designed to improve patient care.
So, in which market are we then operating? I think that most of the people in this room are aware of that cardiac disease is still the #1 killer. And the one thing that makes it really interesting for us is that the market opportunity, if you like to call it that way, is all those patients that are actually seeking for potential stable chest pain issues. But many of those patients are actually not suitable, and they should not be candidates moving on to the patient pathways into the coronary vessels. Fact is that about 90% of all patients that will seek for stable chest pains do not suffer from any cardiovascular disease. Most of those patients are suffering from, it could be anxiety, it could be stress, it could be inflammation, muscle disease, lung disease, etc. Fact is that when you speak to the cardiologists and the general practitioners, they're extremely aware of this factor. So the market opportunity for us as a company is enormous. And this is probably one of the most important slides, and this is really describing on where we think that CADScor should fit. If you look at the process today, a patient that is seeking for stable chest pain, the first thing either the general practitioners or the cardiologist would do would be to do an anamnese. He would interview the patient. Do you suffer from diabetes? Do you have it inheritance in your family, from your mother, from your father, etc.? Then he has determined whether he actually thinks that this patient is with a high likelihood suffering from a cardiovascular disease or coronary artery disease. He would send them for a stress test, which means that we would put them on a bicycle for about 20 minutes and put their heart rate at the maximum. The alternative would actually be to send them further on to what we call a CT scan or even further on to angio. All those are creating an enormous waiting time for the patient, during which period, of course, they're suffering from anxiety. Everybody's very concerned if you have anything that is related to chest pain for yourself. The other thing is, of course, that each of those methodologies are also increasing in the cost and the expertise and the capital investment that you need to do. So the way we are positioning CADScor is that we actually want to be part at the very, very first interaction with the patient and help the physicians, being their second voice, so to speak, to actually help them determine and make them feel very safe in terms of ruling out the patient from the extension of the healthcare process. From a clinical perspective, being a small company, we have actually done pretty well in terms of studies. And this is coming from what's called a DANICAD-1 study. And this has actually put this, what I'm just speaking about, into a very pragmatic and practical example. As I mentioned, the first thing you would do would actually be to do the anamnese, the interview with the patients. And this is coming from our own study. Here you have almost 1,700 patients. And based only on the anamnese, the physician was safely ruling out about 14% of the patient, which means that they took 200 patients and they actually excluded them for the further development into the cardiac pathway, so to speak. If you now take the CADScor system and combine that with the anamnesis, we were actually able to rule out almost 700 patients. So if you want to make a simple math, you could say that you could actually have a net value of about 500 patients less, only based on this population of 1,700 patients, that did not have to go further on for a CT scan, for an angio, or for a bicycle ride. That's really where we're focusing, and that's also where we can see that we can add a tremendous value through a healthcare system, both in terms of the patient situation, less waiting time, and of course also from a cost perspective, as the method itself is a much lesser cost than what you would compare to today. We have a program in which we are working thoroughly, and we have done, of course, some of our exploratory studies. We are still now looking at heart failure, which is the next coming event. For those of you who are in the cardiac world, you know that heart failure has been in a lot of the heat and the discussions in the last couple of years. So we're actually seeking on an early stage whether we can use the same algorithm that we have developed in our system also to help ruling out heart failure patients. Then, of course, we're looking at the clinical purpose, where we have made the investments in terms of the DANICAT study that I was just referring to. And now we're at the stage where we actually need to look at the further steps for both the physicians and the healthcare parameters, and that we're starting off what we call the FILTER study. The FILTER study is about 2,000 patients, and now we are looking at what happens when you actually make the active decision of doing the rule out of the patient, instead of sending them further on through the traditional methods. That's kind of the scope, and that's where we're actually coming from and where we're putting the investment. Like I said in the very beginning, we are right now in the rights issue. So of course we're in the funding industry, and we're starting this on Friday. This week is our last day for the subscription rights for us. And I thought I would just take a few minutes to explain to you what are we going to use those money for, because that is also the equivalent of the short-term strategy for us as a company. And I have one slide here that is in Swedish that I have now evolved into English. The first thing we're going to do is to actually continue our market expansion within European countries. Currently, we are active in Germany, Sweden, and to some extent into Austria. We are working actively with the reimbursement process in Germany, because I think that you all understand that reimbursement is one of the predicaments that we really need in order to bring this further and scale up the business. So that's an ongoing discussion. We have been mentioned in the NICE guidance on an early stage, but as a technology that any physician should actually keep their eyes on and expecting to be something that will evolve into the UK market. So we're going to continue to develop a health economic scale for that part in the UK. Then, of course, we will continue with what we're doing today at our best, which is really working with our local customers and trying to bring the market further on. The second thing we would like to do, and now everybody would say, why actually you want to enter into the US market when you haven't really proven yourself into the European market? That goes without saying. If you want to be getting into the US market, we have to start the process very early. And where we are right now is getting ready to make a submission, and we're going to follow a de novo pathway, because we haven't actually not been able to find any apparatus device. There is no such technology as the acoustic technology that we are representing available with the right indication in the US market. So we have to follow the de novo pathway. So US is the next thing we want to do. Thirdly, of course, we need to continue with the work that we have started on when it comes to clinical trials. So like I said, we have a few that are ongoing that are actually getting to the end, and the next big one is going to be the FILTER study that I mentioned. That will be about 2,000 patients and looking at the actual practical use of the device in itself. And the last thing we want to use the money for is the smaller part, but that is, of course, to continue to develop the technology that we have and actually make it, fit into the requirement we have today with regards to patient logging, patient base, and the communication and the printing functions device itself. So isn't that perfect timing? That was actually just about the end. You don't even have to come up here. I'm done.
I like being up here, so don't try and kick me off stage. I'm going to kick you off stage.
All right, good. So then, here's my last slide in Swedish. Come see me in the afternoon, and we can speak about the företrädesemissionen.
Företrädesemissionen. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
Hi, and then we welcome the CEO of Clinical Laser Thermia Systems, Lars-Erik Eriksson. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Lars-Erik Eriksson. I'm the co-founder of CLS, Clinical Laser Thermia Systems. Sorry, wrong way. We are a company that started in 2006 and it's based on a research from a Professor Carl-Johan Tranberg since the 1980s. We had the headquarters in Lund. We have offices in USA and also in Europe, in Germany. We have a sale that is quite low for the moment, but I'm happy to say that last week we got an order of 1.5 million Swedish crowns from USA, which we are very happy to see that it goes further on, and this might be the start of something that we really want to happen after the years we have been working through and develop our company. What we are doing is we are working with laser. We are using the laser to heat the tumors and to destroy the tumors, cancer tumors in the body. We have in principle two methods. One is called IMILT, and the other one is called FLA. In the case of IMILT, we are killing the tumor with a quite low temperature and with a long time. And the difference with the other is that FLA, focal laser ablation, is a treatment where you have higher temperature and a shorter time. In principle, that's where you kill the tumor. In case of IMILT, we are working in pancreatic cancer, in malignant melanoma, and in breast cancer. But in principle, as long as we have solid cancer tumors, that can be treated with our method. In FLA, we have focused on prostate and neuro and brain tumors. We have a CE mark, and we have a 510(k) approval in the USA. In principle, the product is a laser unit. It's two fibers, and two fibers that can be mentioned here is one of them is a diffuser fiber that is developed by ourselves from a German company that we bought some years ago. And we have found that this diffuser fiber is quite strong when we are treating the tumors. And the other one is called a radial fiber, which has a little less lesion when we are treating it. And of course, our base is also that we need imaging. We need to have to see where we are and what we are doing. In principle, also, we would like to offer to the clinics a workflow that is difficult today because you have to buy certain things from different companies. What we would like to do now is to offer the clinic an effective workflow where we offer a packaging for all needed products. We have a target, we have a navigation, we have an energy delivery, and we have ablation. And this is totally in one package. We can see that it reduces the side effects. We have a short time to recovery, and we also have an improvement on the treatment outcome, which of course is a main purpose for this. If we look at the neuro side, the brain, we have an agreement or a contract with a company called MRI in USA. And this company has a stereotaxy equipment for use in the brain to find the tumor and also to now, together with us, treat the tumor. This is an example of how you can use this combination that we now have done together. The laser unit is linked to the MR. In this case, we have an agreement with Siemens. Of course, that can be used also in Philips and GE, depending on that. But we are working today together strongly with Siemens. And this shows how the structure is. Using the connection between our machine, the laser unit, combining the use of software, which is a company in France called IGT, who has developed this together with us, and that's an important area for us. And then we have the MR scanner, and connected then to the stereotaxy of MRI. If you look at the product portfolio, we can say that we have an image-guided area that is very important for us. We have to find the tumor, and we have to follow what we are doing. We have a cooperation, as I said, with Siemens, and IGT, which is a French company that is now building our connection between our laser unit and the MR scanner, which is quite unique. And we are now working on the FDA approval, and the CE mark is on its way. We have the agreement with, as I said, MRI in the neuro area. We have an Exact Imaging. That is another type of stereotaxy, where you are not using the MR, but also using their system called micro ultrasound. Ultrasound is quite difficult because you can't see really good in the ultrasound, but you can see very good in the MR. And this is something in micro ultrasound that is in between. It's used especially in early stage of prostate cancer. And as I said before, the main part of this is that we have IMILT, and we also have the FLA approval. When it comes to IMILT, which is our main, let's say, flagship, what we are doing is that we are putting the fiber into the tumor. We heat it to 46 degrees during 30 minutes, and the tumor will die between 2 to 3 days. It generates an antigen, and that then triggers the immune defense, and the T cells are created to kill the cancer cells. This is the main purpose of what we are doing. And they are then also working to kill the metastasis in the body. What we have seen in our studies, we got 2.1 million euros from Horizon 2020 to study this. And we can see that we have a very good result when it comes to IMILT. We have, let's say, few patients, because it was difficult to find the patients in Europe. But we have decided that based on the result, we will then start to make a study of around 100 patients. And we hope to have a lot of clinics that we can work together with to get this very quickly ready. We have today some early adopters that are using IMILT in their treatment, and we believe, and they believe, that it's really working well. We, as I said before, that it's important that we combine different types of treatment in the future when it comes to cancer treatment. We are therefore working together with Immunophotonics, which is an American company that has a substance. So their substance, together with our laser heat, will then be the one who is really going to be, in the future, a possibility for treatment and a good result. We're also making preclinical studies with a combination of checkpoint inhibitors, which also give us a result that we really believe could be interesting. We have an early stage of prostate cancer, and now we are talking about FLA. We have seen very encouraging results in this case. We have a positive result using the laser together with the MR guidance, where we can see not only the tumor, but also what we are doing, which is very important, so that we don't destroy anything around the tumor itself. The study is going on in Toronto, and the doctor has made 25 patients, as was a base of a study. But he wants to make another 25, so he has the opinion that this is really unique and has a great possibility for the future. We are also working together with Desert Medical Imaging. When it comes to brain, we are in a stage where we have checked our fibers, which is a special fiber, as I said. It's a diffuser fiber that is non-cooled. And that's also something that really shows a possibility. And we see that using our fiber into the brain is really a possibility and has a positive result in what we have studied until now. Our work when it comes to the market, FLA has a market of around 800 to 1 billion euros in pancreatic and brain. And of course, as I said, there's a lot of other possibilities. And IMILT, we believe we can have around 400 to 640,000 patients out of the 8 million, unfortunately, the big one. We have MRI as a distributor in USA, and they are unique and they are exclusive in this case. So, in the end, thank you. I will I will tell you that when it comes to the key points from CLS, we have a strong product portfolio. We have a safe and gentle and cost-effective treatment. And we will enter into the market as we have done now. As I told you, the first order came last week. And during 2020, we believe to be in the market, a place where we would like to be early. But now we are there after work we have done since 2006. And together with our partners, I believe that we will be able to really make a difference in the treatment of cancer. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars-Erik. And here's Einar Pontén from Lipum to talk about his company.
Okay, I'm Einar Pontén. I'm CEO of Lipum. That is a biopharmaceutical company located in Umeå. Yeah, I know we are in Skåne now. It's 1,200 kilometers north. And why do I travel this far then? Yeah, because I have something important to tell you about, and that is that Lipum has identified a novel target molecule for treatment of chronic inflammatory diseases. And it goes back from academic research by the founders in pediatrics, where they actually discovered this protein as a key enzyme in fat digestion, in nutrition of newborn children and infants from breast milk. When they found this target molecule, the BSSL molecule in breast milk, they also discovered that it was present in the circulation, in urine, in blood. And they tried to figure out where it was formed. So in that search, they explored plaque and also liver samples. And in liver samples that were from patients having fatty liver, they found very high levels of the BSSL molecule. And fatty liver is an inflammatory condition. So that was the starting point for looking more into more details of this. They figured, if you don't have this protein, will you then have less inflammation? And to first examine this, the knockouts, the mouse that were deficient from the protein were exposed to a well-established animal model, the collagen-induced arthritis that is used for rheumatoid arthritis. And as you can see on the right-hand side, that the controls, when they are exposed to this model, they develop the disease as expected, while the deficient mice, they are more or less unaffected. And another type of chronic inflammatory diseases are inflammatory bowel disease, like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. And the model for that is the DSS-induced colitis. And in the same type of experiments, the knockouts, the colon of the knockouts that you can see on this image are almost unaffected, while the control group are seriously affected. So there is an interest to explore what happens then if we block the activity of the BSSL by using anti-BSSL antibody. And this was tested in another model, the Pristane-induced arthritis model on rats. And regardless of the route of administration of the experimental antibody, the animals were considerably less affected compared to the control. And that is also very well illustrated by these photos. To explain the mechanism of action, it was various studies found that the BSSL is released from the neutrophils, and when it binds to the monocytes, the white blood cells, they are activated and migrate to the site of inflammation and also differentiates and stimulate and maintain the inflammation. So the therapeutic idea is then to block the BSSL molecule by an antibody, and that then becomes the product. And luckily for Lipum, a couple of years ago, the researchers were supported by SciLife Lab. You know, SciLife Lab is a national resource for molecular biosciences in Stockholm-Uppsala area. And that project was then to develop and optimize a therapeutic antibody for blocking the BSSL. And starting then with round about 17 experimental antibodies, merging them with the strategies of antibody development and the libraries at the SciLife Lab, that ended up with 38 IgG4 antibodies that were further examined and evaluated, and in the end that was decreased. The number were decreased to 5 antibodies, and these were actually also put into cell line development to test the manufacturability. And out of these, there were a lead candidate drug selected in July this year. And the cell line development is such a state that we will start the production development within a month from now. And that means that we are a preclinical stage company, but we are very rapidly approaching tox studies. We will have non-GMP material this spring. We can do the tox studies, and in the end of next year, we will have GMP material and can start the clinical program to get the clinical proof of concept by end of 2022. So what is the indication? Then, as I mentioned, the founders of the company have their background in pediatrics, and they have for very long been well aware of the medical need within the field of juvenile idiopathic arthritis that affects children. That is a rare disease. Just about 300,000 children in the age up to 16 years old are affected. Beside the stiffness, the pain they have, they also refuse to walk, and they want to stay home from school. So that disease also has social consequences and high costs for the society. The current treatment, there's something wrong with this image, but the current treatment are in the third line, typical anti-TNF drugs. But as you know, in many cases, there are non-responders that actually have no effect of anti-TNF drugs. So they end up in the fourth line treatment where there are very few therapeutic alternatives. And altogether, it's around about 80,000 patients. We aim for an orphan drug designation, and we have estimated that the addressable market or the possible market for Lipum is around about 800 million euro. So our current status is that we have a very comprehensive preclinical data material on rheumatoid arthritis, but also on the IBD field. We have a fully humanized monoclonal antibody candidate drug selected soon in production development. We have received financing support from Horizon 2020. We are in the middle of that project, and we raised 2.4 million euro in a private placement in March this year. What we focus on now is to extend the preclinical program to explore more indications, because we believe that an anti-BSSL antibody will have a wide scope. And that is, of course, attractive because there are a number of inflammatory diseases, chronic inflammatory diseases that have a high unmet medical need. So first of all, we aim for an orphan drug designation, and we estimate that we will need round about 18 million euro to get to proof of concept in 2022. And the next financing round will be during the first half of next year, especially in particular to finance then the GMP manufacturing. I think I was faster than 10 minutes, but someone should be that, so I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. It's good you're keeping me on my toes, so I can't nod off.
Actually, I promised Göran.
Oh, you promised, Jan. Okay.
Oh. Time to him.
Well,
Thank
that's
you.
okay. So we're in for an 11-minute presentation then from Göran Beijer, the
Thank you,
CEO
Einar,
of
my
Dicot.
friend. Hello, I'm Göran Beijer, and I'm the CEO of Dicot. Dicot is a preclinical drug development company based in Uppsala. We're focusing the areas of sexual dysfunction among men, meaning erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation. We're a pretty young company, 3-4 years old. We were listed on Spotlight last year, 2018, during our first rights issue. We have a market cap of 60+ million today. We were just through, through a rights issue where we raised another 20 million for further preclinical work. It was successfully done. We were oversubscribed by 244%. To give you some context to what we do, we're working on sexual dysfunction among men. And this is a study called 70 is the New 50, done at the University of Gothenburg some years back, showing that men today, compared to during the 70s, feel healthier, feel happier, exercise more, and having overall a much more active life. And with having a much more active life and you feel healthier, you would like to perform doing physical activities, you would like to travel more, you would like perhaps to work for a longer period, but you also would like to have a strong relationship with your partner and you would like to have an active sex life. So things are changing. On the other side, you can also see, looking at the indication of erectile dysfunction, that even at the age of 40, there are a lot of men affected by erectile dysfunction from time to time. And there are various causes to that, other types of diseases, but you can also see at the rising age, the prevalence is increasing. So we usually say that 50% of men above 40 are hit by erectile dysfunctional problems from time to time. And erectile dysfunction is a huge indication area today, and you probably know Viagra, Cialis are the most common drugs on the market today, with the global sales of $5 billion a year. The drawback with these drugs is that they have a short half-life. You have to take them in advance of sexual activity, meaning 30 to 60 minutes. And you also probably know that there are side effects, headache and flushing, etc., etc. The other indication where we work is premature ejaculation, which affects men over 20 up to 70, 80 years old at the prevalence of 5 to 7%. And there is only one drug approved today. In 30 countries in Europe, it's not approved in US. They have a lot of other off-label products they use for affecting the premature ejaculation. Both these indications can cause lost self-esteem and also lead to depression by men, and of course influence the partner relation. And also many men don't even see the doctor for this indication. It's shameful. If looking at the old demographics, you can also see that the population, 60+ people, as part of the total population, will increase quite dramatically over the next 30 years. So this is just to show you that there is an enormous market today, and that this market will continue to grow. So our drug candidate, Libegreen, is actually, we're handling both or hoping to treat both these indication with the same drug. And the specific thing with the drug is that the effect lasts for up to 2 weeks, which is very different. And of course, reduces the need for planning of sexual activity. It's based on research done at the University of Uppsala during many years, and actually started from a collaboration with researchers at Madagascar. There is a decoction from a specific tree at Madagascar used even today for treating erectile dysfunction. And from that decoction, the work was done at the research lab in Uppsala for years, and a specific molecule was isolated, and that's the molecule we're working on today. And Joel Wikberg, who is the professor and pharmacologist at the university, also repeated a lot of studies with rats where you can see at the bars, maybe you can't see the numbers, etc. here, but this is to illustrate that there is effect on rats, both on the number of penetrations and also the time to ejaculations at various doses. And the slide to the picture to the right just demonstrate that the complex system driving the sexual functions in the body. And today we can say we don't know exactly the mechanisms of our drug. That's something we're working on right now. We have done some work recently comparing the effects of sildenafil, which is Viagra, with our drug, also on rats. And we have seen that there is a similar effect, but it's very, very clear that our drug also seems to increase the lust part. It stimulates the lust while also increasing the other effects that we are after. We are in the middle of the preclinical work. We're producing active substance. We have done some of the toxicology testing. We will continue that early next year. We are also work together with an outside company on the pharmacological studies to get some clearer answers on the mechanism side. And we will prepare next year for phase 1, and hopefully we aim to start phase 1 at mid-2021. So what we aim at is to, of course, we hope to demonstrate effect on both these indications based on the folk medicine use of the molecule, of the decoction, and also the animal studies that we have. And of course, we would like to drive this through phase 1 and phase 2 and create data proof of concept to see that this works without any severe side effects. And we hope to also, of course, get closer to one or several big companies to help us bring the drug to the market in the next couple of years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Göran. I won't be talking for long. I know you're all looking forward to a little break now. I basically just want to say that this is the second year that we do the BioStock Life Science.
Let's get going. And welcome to Peter Morsing, the CEO of VNT Research.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me? Hello? Okay. So my name is Peter Morsing. I am the CEO of VNT Research. We're a company based in Malmö. It was been on the stock market spotlight since 2009. Our specialization is to prevent metastasis formation. And the research is about WNT5A, which is a protein found in the body. We are working on to develop a drug candidate to agonize this system. As we know that the best treatment for tumors is to remove them, we know that about 70% of patients will be cured by removing that tumor, depending if we find it early enough. So surgery is the first treatment. If you have remaining cells, you start chemotherapy. The worst thing is not the primary tumor, it's the metastasis. The metastasis is what kills about 90% of all patients. If you look at this slide, we have localized tumors. If those are removed, you have survival of about 90%. If you see regional spread, which means that it has been penetrating into the adjacent tissue, we're talking about colon cancer right now, and you have cells moving into the lymph system, you see that the survival rate goes down to 70%, while if you have metastasis, we are reaching tremendous mortality around 90%. We are addressing colon cancer in our current phase 2 trial, but we know from preclinical experiments that it works in colon cancer. It will most likely work also in breast, prostate, and colorectal cancer. We are addressing about 60% of the cancer market. The current treatment, as I described earlier, the stage 1, stage 2, 3, and 4, representing going from polyps to regional localized tumors to tumors that have spread into the lymph nodes, and stage 4 that are the metastatic cancer. There are no pharmacological treatment early because it's not required. Basically, you remove your tumor and you're cured. If you have tumor cells entering into the lymph node, this becomes worse and you get chemotherapy. And these patients are stage 2C, 3. If you are also stage 4 with metastatic, chemotherapy is used as well, but it's not as efficient. But most companies, if not all but us, I would say, are addressing the stage 4, the metastatic patients. We are in phase 2. We started this trial this year. We had the first patient in April. We had some issues early with recruitment. This is a new process. We are working with as a neoadjuvant treatment. So it involves both radiologists, surgeons, and oncologists. So you have to form these working groups. That is normally formed in every hospital, but usually they come in after surgery when you have removed that tumor. We need to pre-treat, we would like to pre-treat our patients at the diagnosis, through the surgery, and up to the point of chemotherapy. So as a consequence of that, we decided to increase the number of sites. We increased in Spain. We have now 7 more centers contracted or close to be contracted, 4 of them already approved to start. Also very important, we decided to move into Hungary. Hungary is an interesting country, have very, very good track record. We have 12 of the top centers in Hungary under contract negotiations. The application was sent in mid-September. We expect to be approved early December. These centers are very agile and ready to go. So our hope is that we have all centers, including their first patients, somewhere in January. We have a readout to look at safety in our patients. And do we consider this drug to be safe? We look when we have 10 patients on drug and 10 patients in control arm and see, do we see anything that is not looking very good? So far, we have no reports of any serious adverse events. We have the normal things that you see in clinical trial, slight headache, nausea, these kind of things, but it's not like seen in every patient. But I mean, we have to wait for the safety committee to tell whether this is considered to be a safe drug and we can continue the clinical trial as planned. These results we hope to be able to announce somewhere. So we continue our recruitment, and we will report when we reach certain milestones in recruitment. We expect to have about 40 patients included somewhere in March. One very important aspect of our trial, when you do cancer trials, you usually look at recurrence rate. When do the person recur? And this takes everything from 12 to 24, 36 months from surgery if they recur. We use a marker called circulating tumor DNA. This is a marker that has been widely accepted by the drug industry. And for us, that's very important because our exit strategy is, of course, to attract a major pharmacological partner who would like to work with us moving forward to develop this into phase 3 and into other indications. We have contracted a group called the SAGE Group. It's a UK, US-based company with very good reputation. They have an enormous network. They're assisting us and finding potential partners for us. These discussions are already ongoing, but we will intensify this once we have the signal, which we expect to come this summer. What I think is very good for us, and I think is very encouraging, we have a very, very strong scientific advisory board that are extremely supportive of our program, the science, and the way we conduct the studies. We have from left to right, we have Professor Andres Cervantes. He was the elected president of the European Cancer Society, a very well-renowned person. We have our CMO, Joachim Gullbo. He's a professor in medicine and also in pharmacology. He started his own company that he sold and left, and currently working in the US in a CRO. And we hope to, when he returned to Sweden, that he will take on a position with us. We have Jan from Oregon. On a global scale, he's a nestor in this area. Over 700 publications. He is used by the FDA, by European authorities. He's a well-known presenter, both in international conferences, but also in all different kind of settings on oncology around the world. And we have Ramon Salazar. He is very, very well-known in Spain. He is basically in most committees there can be in Spain, and he's our principal investigator for our trial. So our focus moving forward, we will of course continue with our phase 2 clinical trial. This is our absolute highest priority. Once we have the data, this is something we will communicate. We're preparing for that by priming potential partners in this area. At the same time, we are looking at where would we go if this trial comes out positive. If we don't find a partner, of course, we need to be prepared to run forward with our data because this is a very, very promising drug. So we have a very intensive work with the patent portfolio. We have today 3 valid patents. We have 4 applications, and we are concentrating on prolonging the survival of the drug. Like this, okay? We filed patents last year on production. We have a new way of the manufacturing to increase the commercialization probabilities. And as mentioned, we will intensify the work to find a new partner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. I thought you handled that very well. Sorry about that. And welcome, Anders Karlsson from IDG.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Anders Karlsson, and I am the CEO of IDN since 2 months back. My background is pharma, medtech, and biotech. I have, before coming here, being at Allenex as a CEO, there being responsible for as a CEO, and then we sold the company to CareDx Inc., a US-based company listed on NASDAQ, and there I was responsible for the integration as well as the global business in that organization. My background has been transplantation and also immunotherapy, and we have seen a lot of things that can be improved, even if I've done a lot there before. And there is a niche for IDN. There is still unsolved problem out there when we have an activated, unwanted activation of system activation of the immune system. This is anti-drug antibodies, where the immune system attacks the biological treatments. It can be the transplant rejections, where you treat with immunosuppressive treatment the whole life, and autoimmune diseases. And what if you can turn this unwanted effect off? The dendritic cells plays a key role within the immune system. It decides between friend or foe, wanted or unwanted. Here you see the system activating on the right-hand side, and when you have enemy in the bodies, virus and bacteria, which activates the effector T cells, the fighters. But if this is activating towards the pharmaceuticals and transplants, then we have a problem. The IDN solution is to reprogram the immune response. And here you see the dendritic cells being activated in fighting mode towards pharmaceuticals and transplants. But if we can reprogram that, we will then prevent the undesired activation and also maintain the defense against other threats such as virus and bacteria and cancers. Our treatment is unique. It's unique for every patient. We take it out, we take the cells out from the patients and process them outside the body. We introduce them for antigens, for example, the pharmaceuticals and the organ. We add a unique setting of different substances, and we create a tolerance inducers, a mix of different components, which you can call the IDN cocktail. And then we create the tolerogenic dendritic cells. So you actually take the cells out from the body, you train the immature dendritic cells to be tolerogenic dendritic cells and also to become the peacemakers of the treatment. Long-term effect is anticipated, but I will take you through this how it looks like for the patient. You start with leukapheresis at the local hospital. You take the cells, send it to IDN, and we make the IDN cell therapy, as I explained on the other side. The treatment is sent back to the hospital. You treat the patient bi-weekly for 3 to 4 times, and then we anticipate the long-term effect of the treatment. Our prioritized indications, we start with hemophilia A, kidney transplantation, and define other future opportunities is AD, autoimmune diseases, and other indications. For hemophilia A, the genetic deficiency is in the clotting factor 8, and the treatment factor 8 is the standard treatment. We create a treatment towards the antibodies that attack the ADAs, creative factor VIII treatment. In kidney transplantation, we instead take the cells from the donor and pre-treat them with our tolerogenic inducer in the recipient. So you pre-treat them before you make the transplantation. We have a screening program based on the long experience within IDN for this in this area. And we have a unique program where we select the compounds and we take them through 3 different steps with the increasing level of complexity. Last year, in late stage of December, we find that we added the third step, also to see if we was able to induce the regulatory T cells. We was not able to do that with the current candidate, Cebularine. So we had to stop the development of that product and also restart the development and make it one more time and do it better. We was able to develop a new tolerance inducer, and we are now in a setting where we was able, with a combination of 3 to 4 different substances, we delivered positive results in June 2019. And here we are now in the process to patent this compound, and we are in very close future able to send it in. And we will then have a new patent covering 20 years from now. Execution on our clinical strategy. We have an in vitro validation of our tolerogenic cell therapy. We start with hemophilia A, and we are now in the preclinical phase, and we are setting up all the things that is needed to move as fast as possible into clinical study. Next year, we will optimize for GMP production. We will also make the production or prepare for the production for clinical study material and set up for clinical trials. End 2020, the plan is to have clinical trial applications sent in to authorities, and after that to roll out the clinical trial for hemophilia. We have an external validation. We received in 2017 €2.9 million in European Commission funding. We have still 1.4 million to go, and we accept that everything will be paid out in line with that. We're a proud member of CAMP. Together with the big pharma companies, we are there together with a few smaller companies, and it's supported with Vinnova with 48 million. We have a management team which has been there for a long time. There's a lot of experience within this group. And we also have a very experienced board of directors. In general management, we have the co-founder, Leif Salford, professor in neurosurgery at the University of Lund. We have Karin Hagendal with more than 20 years of experience within cell therapy development. And we also have Christina Herder with more than 20 years of experience in business development in the pharma industry. Saying that, we perceived that the future is bright. We at IDN also think that the future belongs to cell therapy. IDN has a novel, innovative, and validated cell therapy technology. We have an efficient tolerance inducer that has been developed. We are addressing unmet clinical needs, opening up for attractive reimbursement models. And IDN is moving towards clinical trial readiness with IDO8, our first indication. And we assume that will happen with the first clinical application in end 2020, and thereafter following clinical trials in line with plans. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then we welcome up the CEO of Iconovo, Lastov. If you can.
He stole it.
Think we're good to go now?
No, I'm all set.
All set.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much, BioStock, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to present Iconovo. So I usually kick off presentation by showing this. Those are the people being our customers. 500 million people in the world suffer from diseases to the lung. That's mainly asthma and COPD. And this number is growing, and in many countries, especially developing countries, those diseases are underdiagnosed and probably much more higher numbers than this shows. The drugs used to manage those diseases sell for about $30 billion annually. And those are drugs, as I said, to manage the disease. You cannot cure asthma, you cannot cure COPD, you can manage the disease pretty well, and those are the drugs used to that. And the market is very asymmetric. Few blockbuster products have pretty much the whole market. So this is GlaxoSmithKline, AstraZeneca, Boehringer Ingelheim and Novartis are the big players, and they pretty much own the market. The rest are small brands. And what all these products have in common is that they are either off patent or becoming off patent in a short time. And normally in the pharma industry, when the drug comes off patent, the generics flow in, and the price plummets, and you have like 10, 15 generic products taking the market share. This is not the case when it comes to respiratory diseases. And the reason is that respiratory drug and inhalation drug comprises of two major parts. One is the drug in powder form in this case, and that's where you have the drug that you should get into the lung to manage the disease. But you also have an inhaler, an inhalation device that helps you to dose, deliver, and make sure that the drug is deposited in the correct position in the lungs. So you need a very, very delicate balance and cooperation between the drug formulation in the powder format and inhaler. And to develop this requires a multidisciplinary team, which is technically very challenging. And typically, generic companies don't have that capability in-house. It's only the big pharma companies that already have products on the market that have those skills. But if generics wanted to enter the market, they don't have that. So what are they facing if they wanted to enter the market? Long development times. To develop this kind of product takes 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It's a high cost, obviously, to spend this much time on developing, and also a very, very high risk. After spending 5 years and tens of millions, you don't really know where you have a product on the market. So this is very deterring hurdles for generic companies to enter this very lucrative market. So here we come in. Iconovo, we know how to do this developer. So we have our own devices that we have developed in-house. We have engineers and people doing the device development. We have formulation labs, formulation experts doing all the formulation development in-house in our labs. And we also have analytics. We have labs with all the equipment, skilled staff to do the development. So we have everything in-house to do the development of those very complex multidisciplinary development products. And the staff we have is very experienced in this area. Many of us has worked with 10, 20, sometimes even 30 years with developing inhalation products. So it's those very, very experienced staff doing this. So we do what we really do best. So by working together with us, the generic companies see this instead. Much, much shorter time to market. We invest in the development up to a certain platform level. Then the generic companies come in, partner with us, and just do the final adjustments to put the product on the market. This reduces the cost for them, and maybe most significantly, it reduces the risk, because before signing with us, they can do all the testing. We have prototypes, so we can do the testing, feasibility studies, you name it, in order to be sure that the risk is reduced and there is only a very well-defined and short development time to reach the clinical trial phase and then the market. So what do we have? We have several products already. So we have one inhalation device, which is very similar in terms of operation and function to the AstraZeneca Turbohaler. We have a device which is similar to the Novartis products, and we also have one more which is intended to use instead of injections. I'll mention this a bit more later. Those products are protected by 6 granted patents, and we have about the same number still pending, but those are granted patents. And our business model is very, very simple. The generic companies that partner with us, we co-fund the development, the final development, so they pay us milestone payments to reach certain stages in the development. And after that, when the product's on the market, we get royalties. So for our partners, the cost is more of limited to development, the early cost. We make our money when the product's on the market, and we get royalties. But that's more acceptable for our partners because that's when they get revenue, we get a share of that. So one of our major products, we have 2 major agreements signed already, and one is for making a generic version of AstraZeneca's Symbicort Turbohaler. And in that project, we have already reached a clinical trial phase. So we have already completed what we call a pilot clinical trial. It's a PK study where we got really good results, even though it's very, very early in development. The product is not finalized yet, but we already got very good results, and we are very close to being equivalent already. So it's very, very encouraging. And last, I have 3 minutes, ICO1. This is a product which is not intended for generic products. This is intended to replace injections. This is a unidose device. This holds only 1 dose, a larger dose, about 50 milligrams, sealed and protected inside the device. You peel off the aluminum strip sticking out, you peel it off, you suck on the device, you get the dose, that's it, and you can throw it away. And what we see a great benefit of that, opposed to injectable vaccines, is you see here, to give traditional vaccines, you inject it, so you need a syringe, you need sterility, you need trained medical professionals to do it, and also, you cannot read it, but it says store at from 2 to 8 degrees, do not freeze. You have the cold chain, you have to store vaccine cold. If you have a dry powder, it's stable at room temperature, so you don't need to store it cold. And if you look at how vaccines are managed and transported and handled in the developing countries, this is here you see the disposal of the hazardous waste of used syringes. It's on landfills where people actually scavenge those to get used syringes to sell, and the cold chain is ice boxes carried around. So this is how it's used in practice. By using our inhaler, you have dry powder in a plastic inhaler, no cold storage, and no hazardous waste. So just to sum up, last year in April, we raised some capital and made an IPO on First North, and so we are well funded. We have a lot of cash to fund our development and to build the organization. So we're very fortunate with that, and we also have pretty good development on the stock exchange with increase in share price, and the market cap is about 350 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Urs. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. And then...
I give this to you.
Oh, well, I will
not steal it.
No, I'd like to keep this one. But I will hand it over to the CEO of CanimGuide, Carl Magnus Högerkopp. Here you go, the stage, and this is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. And Thank you for inviting me to the BioStock Days. Sorry for making some noise before. So introducing Canem Guide Therapeutics. My name is Carl Magnus Högerkorp. I'm the CEO of Canem Guide Therapeutics. We're based here in Lund-Malmö region. And I'm switching back to cancer. We are developing a immuno-oncology concept, which is peptide-based. And just to give you some background on the company, it's a private clinical stage company, which is based around a platform technology. We are developing immunomodulatory peptides, actually looking into various different types of therapeutic areas, but focusing on cancer. We have a first-in-class immunomodulator in solid tumors, and our primary focus right now is head and neck cancer, where there's a big medical unmet need. We do have a first-in-man study ongoing. It's called phase 1 here. I would regard it more as a phase 0. We are investigating the drug in vivo. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. You are all aware about how checkpoint inhibitors has revolutionized cancer therapy. Here to the left is a simplification of what BMS, Opdivo, and Yervoy combinations has achieved in terms of efficacy. This is in metastatic melanoma. To the right, we see an image which sort of points to the future, where we will, in 2025, approach around $50 billion for these types of drugs. However, we do also see that still in other indications that 60 to 80% are not responding to these types of treatments. So there's still biology there to be discovered. Of course, that is approached by digging into your immunology books, trying to find another co-stimulatory receptor to target. Currently, there are 60 targets being explored, and the modality of choice is large molecules, as in antibodies. Peptides. I told you we're working with peptides. And certainly peptides is an opportunity for targeted therapies. To the left here, we do have a breakdown of what's happening in oncology right now. So apart from chemotherapy and radiation therapy, the other sector is targeted therapies, where we have one section going towards growth blockers, anti-VEGF and stuff like that. But the other part there is immuno-oncology and immunomodulators. Currently, we have 10 approved drugs, which mostly constitutes anti-PD-1s and anti-PD-L1s alongside anti-CTLA-4. However, I just would like to highlight and position peptides into this, because peptides are certainly very interesting in terms of as a molecule targeting peptide or protein-protein interactions. It's actually on par with antibodies when it comes to being interfering with protein-protein interactions. It's on par with antibodies when it comes to specificity and affinity. It's on par with antibodies roughly when it comes to safety and toxicity. However, when we look at peptides and immunogenicity, you see that it's actually on par with small molecules. Peptides are typically not known to have a huge degree of problem with immunogenicity, and also favoring tissue penetration, and also very interesting aspect of this, cost of goods. alongside administration. What we see in our concept is that we can administer a drug by subcutaneous administration, comparing to biologics where you have a 2-hour infusion currently. So first-in-class immunomodulatory synthetic peptide, novel mechanism of action. We are targeting albumin, as immunosuppressive albumin sequence called 3028, and we do see a very favorable safety profile. What we are looking for is the pathologic remission, and we're looking for that in human and dogs right now. And we are studying this in human and dogs in parallel, another benefit of working with peptides. We do see that we have effect with a single agent, and we are well aligned with immune checkpoint inhibitors in this concept. Alongside this, we have several biomarkers for stratification and response. Of course, we are encouraged by seeing stuff like this. This is from our first patient that we treated. So it's a tissue sample that is before and after treatment. So this is 6 days after a single injection intratumorally. What it illustrates in red here is that we have recruited a massive immune response into this cold tumor. Interestingly, this person has not responded to PD-1 therapy, which makes this even more interesting. I've talked about albumin, and this is around the mechanism of action. So this is a novel mechanism of action and the importance of albumin. So albumin in cancer is actually utilized as an energy source under hypoxic conditions. It's illustrated here on the left here in the mouse study where labeled albumin is injected into the mouse, and you can see after 72 hours that most of that albumin actually is distributed to the tumor. What we have discovered is that there is an immune suppressor mechanism stemming from albumin fragments that are catabolized by the cancer. One such sequence is the 3028 sequence, which we have discovered. And it's a very potent immunosuppressor. In green here on the left is where it's actually located, that sequence, on the intact albumin molecule. But then as the albumin is catabolized, it's released and is impacting on the immune system. It actually impacts on a very central molecule to the immune system called LFA1. And we see that here on the left. In red is the LFA1. In yellow is a very important co-stimulatory receptor called CD28, sorry, and in green is the T-cell receptor. So it's actually a very important molecule in establishing the immunological synapse. And that is of importance when it comes to priming T-cells to an immune response. It's important for T-cell killing. Not only that, LFA1 is involved in migration, and it's also involved in differentiation of the T cells. So it's a very central player in the immune system. It's also been highlighted that LFA1 is also important in the handling of tumors. We see that LFA is involved in the whole cancer immunity cycle. Just to quickly tell you how the mechanism of action is. It's very simple. We have a T cell, we have the LFA1 receptor, we have its ligand. In between that is the albumin sequence called 3028. We add P28R, which is our drug candidate that relieves this suppression. We have explored this in numerous dog studies, and we have started a first-in-man study, which is a first phase 0 study, and we are now preparing for other studies. Here's shortly some examples from a dog. So this is 6-day post-treatment. We already see, so here's the tumor on the left. 6 days post-treatment, we see massive induction of necrotic tissue. We also see the induction of an immune response in these samples. Told you about phase 1 studies ongoing. We're preparing, we are doing CTA enabling studies for doing subcutaneous administration and a study for around that. We do have impressions from the first patient. As I mentioned, we do see an induction of immune response rapidly after 6 days, and we see histopathological remission. This is before, this is after 6 days. Shadows of tumor cells are seen, very important to us and very encouraging for us to move forward. Again, just a summary. And I think what we're doing is unlocking cancer immunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl Magnus. And with that, we will have another tea and coffee break. And we will be back in about 15 minutes for the third panel session of the day. Thank you.
So we are back from the final break for the final session of today, of the day one of BioStock Life Science Summit here in Lund at Medicon Village. Hope you all had a nice coffee break and mingle. We're going to kick off this final session with a panel discussion, and it's the last panel discussion of today. And the subject for this is refueling the unique Nordic ecosystem and corporate finance and capital raise insights. That's a mouthful. Here with me to help me straighten that out, I have four distinguished gentlemen here. We have Benjamin Nordin of ABG Sundal Collier, and we have Stefan Lundberg of Erik Penser Bank. We also have Kristoffer Krolak from Vator Securities, and Jonas Ljungström from Naventus. Welcome. Let's start by giving them a warm hand. So, raising capital is sort of the backbone for almost all companies in this sector, the life science sector. It's a common denominator, and it's an ever-present, well, problem, if you put it that way. And you guys are all experts in helping these companies achieve what they need in terms of attracting capital. So obviously it's very interesting to hear what you have to say of today's investor climate as to helping life science companies raise the capital they need. First of all, though, I would like to have you all have a 30-second introduction of yourself and tell us what you do and a little bit about the company you work for. We can start right here. Benjamin.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, by the way. My name is Benjamin Nordin. I'm co-heading the healthcare corporate finance business at ABG Sundal Collier. ABG is a Norwegian investment bank with the head office, of course, in Oslo then, but a big office in Stockholm as well. We're roughly 250 employees in Stockholm. We're about 100 people working. We have various sectors we're focusing on. Healthcare is one important one. That's a short intro.
Great, thank you.
My name is Jonas Ljungström, and I am the managing partner of Naventus Corporate Finance. We are a fairly young company. We are 10 employees, and one of our focus areas are life science, but also in renewables and technology.
So my name is Kristoffer Krolak. I'm a partner at Vator Securities. We're also a fairly young company, founded in 2010. We specialize in financing within growth companies, especially life sciences. We do private placements, IPOs, directed share issues, rights issues. So far we have listed around 10 companies on Nasdaq First North and on the main markets.
Yeah, my name is Stefan Lundberg, and I work at Erik Penser Bank. We're a fairly old company then, I would say. Founded by Erik Penser, who has his roots here in this area actually. And as a bank, we are divided into two business areas actually. We have wealth management, where we take care of other people's money, and then we have corporate finance, where we raise capital for mainly small cap companies. We are we are one of the leading partners in that segment, small caps, and we work with mainly tech and life science companies. And I've been in this industry for nearly 20 years now, so I've been around for both ups and downs, and I think we are somewhere in a perfect storm here actually, but we can talk more about that later on.
Let's start off right there, because as you said, you have quite a few years in the business, and it would be nice to hear your perspective on the almost, if you say, the recent years, how the market has changed with several new companies coming into the market.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Nasdaq First North, for example, we are over 300 listed companies there now. We have delegations coming from all over the world actually, visiting Sweden to hear about the story about the First North growth market success story. And I mean, the real heroes are, in my view, the retail investors. We have a really broad retail investor following here in Sweden, which are really unique actually. And since a couple of like 6 or 7 years, there's been a lot of individuals and family offices and old entrepreneurs investing in this segment, both the tech but also in the life science and in the medtech sector. So, and the last 2-3 years, we've seen the institutional investor coming down, investing in really small companies with a market cap of 100 or even less than that. So, I mean, from our perspective here, I think life hasn't been easier actually, but you never know.
Things might change.
Yeah, I've been around for quite some time as well. So I started as an equity analyst 20 years ago, and it's interesting to compare the world right now, at least the local world we're living in here in the Nordics, which has changed dramatically. When I started, I think we were, I haven't counted, but I guess we were around 40-50 analysts covering the sector. And now we're down to a fraction of that, and the number of companies has grown with, I would say, 5 times maybe, which in itself is a problem because you don't have analysts covering the companies that are listed. So that in itself is a challenge for investors. Of course, when they invest, they need someone to hold their hand, and someone to actually who's able to go in depth and understand what the company is doing. So I think that's a big challenge right now. But I agree that it's a good environment for investing in biotech right now.
Yes, and I need to say that I've been actually 25 years as well in the market. And I believe that the life science sector, and I'm a generalist, is a little bit like a wave landscape, meaning that with the environment currently with 0 interest rates, profitable large caps, a lot of wealthy individuals, as we read today in Dagens Industri, $374,000 millionaires. There is capital available, and I believe that very much of our work is actually to find our place somewhere along the line from Professor Borrebäck earlier today with the sort of founding companies together with the health cap, Björn Olander, up to the Mattias Häggblom's larger caps. So we need to find our space. Our space is like raising 50 to 200 million SEK and sort of assessing where it's a fair bet, and when the market in the wave environment is there, assist the company and try to find the investors among the institutionals or the high net worth individuals.
What's your experience?
And I would like to add that one thing that makes the Swedish market so special and unique is that we have a very diversified pool of investors or capital. We have the high net worth individuals, we have the generalists and the specialists who's investing in smaller companies. So with having a diversified pool of capital makes the investor base very agile and dynamic, so you can always find some source of money these days.
But is that also then a case of seeing that? I remember someone in an earlier panel saying something about volatile capital as well when it comes to the retail base. And would you say that you have seen any fluctuation during the last, say, 4 years, from 2015 and onwards, as from your perspective, to how do you feel about actually attracting these investors, the high net individuals and so on? Is it easier now or is it harder?
So I'm the young one in the panel. I don't have it 25 years behind me, but I would say that one thing to look out for is if you have a large tail of early investors, retail investors that have come in at a cheap price before the IPO. Once you make the IPO, you need to have a good sense of how your cap table is structured. So if you have a pre-IPO, not long before the IPO, the early investors, they have a tendency to flood the market with cheap shares, taking home profits in the first trading days. So that is one thing to look out for.
So as an investor, you should also be very aware of what's been going on before the IPO.
Exactly, yeah.
And, sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
But that's very much our kind of work. As you said about the cap table, there is often where you have like venture capital investors in the cap table, where you yourself as a financial advisor play a role in actually cleaning up the cap table in the process. So in that context, you have a cleanup situation as well as sort of a lock-up secondary sales issues to take care of.
And I agree, but as an advisor, I think it's really important to know or to assess the investor pool, so to say. See which investor is interested in this asset at this time. Because when you create a value in your company and you de-risk your asset, you will attract different investors in different stages. And taking a company from preclinical development into clinic, or pushing a fully developed product into commercial stage, there will be different investors for the different stages. So I think as an advisor, it is really important to establish this, what we call the buyer universe, who will buy this asset at this time, and also with regards to what has happened before in the company in the cap table.
So going then towards market, going from early stage and thinking about going public, from a company perspective, what are the absolute do's and don'ts that you should think of when you're planning or pondering an IPO? What would you say, Benjamin?
I would actually repeat what Mattias Häggblom, I think, said just a couple of hours ago, that under promise and over deliver. I think it's in these times it's quite easy to over promise and to attract the wrong type of investors, and that will eventually down the line be extremely problematic for you as a company when you're trying to create long-term value. If you have something of value in your company, you should definitely build on that, and that in itself will create value for investors long term. So that's the biggest mistake you can do, basically, to attract the wrong type of investors that will only look at when the next data point comes up, or when you're hitting into a delay or something like that. You want shareholders who understands the equity story and can invest also in hard times, in difficult times.
Would you say that there's a knowledge, a lack of knowledge among the retail base of investors as far as these value inflection points and the long haul, to be in it for the long haul? Would you say that there's a need for more education among investors?
Definitely yes. That's where
you come in.
We come in to the picture, and that is not as much as ourselves. It's our sort of experts, and also our job is a lot to assess the management and the board and the scientific board to feel that the investors we are taking in, if they are retail investors, that, as I said before, really have a fair bet, that they are betting on the same premises as these credible people that really believe in it on the same terms. That's, our responsibility.
Yeah, I just want to fill in a bit about what to think about if you're going public. From advisor perspective, I mean, we need time. We need time to learn the company. We need time to understand the business, to understand who is going to invest in it, to understand the current shareholders' view on this company, how long-term are they. So, I mean, be out there in good time. I mean, 12 months is not that much of a time to prepare for an IPO. And one other thing is that we have done like 10, 12 IPOs the last years, and I think only one of them have been a pure biotech case. One has been a medtech case, but I mean, the problem there is we only want to go out with a secured from Cornerstone's institutional investors IPO. Otherwise, we don't think that we will have a good start of a trading in that share. And the problem is today that it's not that easy to find cornerstones in pure play biotech cases. So it's a little bit of a problem in that case, but.
And if I can add one more thing, is we like to see that companies have they raise enough capital so they can fully finance their business plan, so they can execute on a business plan. I am personally not a big fan of the spoon-feeding approach, where companies are being funded with small pools of capital, because I think that makes the companies think short term. And even the thing that a fully financed study or a fully financed commercial launch could be a key factor in a long-term investor's decision to invest or not. So having a fully financed business plan to execute on, I think, is very important.
Know that sorry, I think it was Industrifonden and Sweden Bio, they released a report earlier this year showing that for the last 3 or something years, there has actually been an increase in refinancing and smaller amounts at the time. So this should then, according to the theory, be a problem down the line.
Yeah, I think that 2-3 years ago we saw loads of companies coming into First North making smaller IPOs, and these companies need refinancing to execute on their business plan long term. So I think we will see more of that.
But as advisors and helping these companies, and I mean, I presume it's an easy task to tell the companies that you need to raise more capital. How easy is it to help them execute on that plan? What would you say?
You'd be surprised that, I mean, coming back to business plans, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes, I think, companies, I mean, if you read basic entrepreneurial literature, the first thing you do is a business plan. And you'd be surprised how many companies don't actually have a good business plan or have a business plan at all. So as an advisor, when as a financial advisor, if you're talking about like an IPO or something, I've been in situations where we've actually needed to rewrite or write the business plan first and then come back in a year or so. And that's very strange, given that that's basically the first thing you should do. So I think I actually forgot the question. What was the question?
No,
this was important to tell you guys.
Yeah. No, now I actually forgot the question as well.
Yeah, okay.
But then I can pick it up.
Thank you.
I would say the special little challenging topic with this sector is the length from the starting point to actually producing the drug and the different phases. So we need to find our space in the phases. If it's 15, 20 years from the lab here in the university until the drug, we need to come in somewhere, at least talking for myself and some of you. We come in some sort of phase two, where you have sort of had the angel investors, some VCs, and then where we sort of try to bridge the gap between hopefully finding institutional investors, but they are quite few, so they are a bit picky and difficult. So we need to find the ultra high net worth individuals
who believe in the good cause, but in the business thing, and then sort of bridge it to the big pharma. and we are in the space 50 to 200, and Benjamin, you're a bit higher up in the hierarchy maybe, but something like that.
So if the challenge is to go from the early stage financing and before you can or want to attract the bigger fish, so to speak, then it falls down to some of you guys to help the companies out here. And when looking at IPOs, you say if they come to you and they're not really prepared, even with a business plan. So when is a good time to IPO from your perspective? Because we always hear that the Swedish market has quite a few very early stage companies listed. So when is the good time, according to you guys?
When there's an IPO window.
No, but I mean, yeah, when you can attract institutional capital, actually, and I think that is somewhere around phase 2, more or less. And also, it should be a focused portfolio, and also, yeah, but I mean, otherwise, it's hard to raise really much capital to this kind of companies that are too early stage.
Yeah. As I said, I pitched on some of the people here in the room. I did the Index Pharma 250 million IPO at First North, which you later on did the directed share issue in. What was very tempting in that case was a fantastic board, scientific board, where you had you were aligned with the owners and the management, having the institutional investors, SEB, Industry Fund, and taking a corner position where you could feel very comfortable then to sell to the, first of all, ultra high net worth individuals, and then tail on the retail investors. That was at least a very nice sort of life science transaction from a fair perspective from my side.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so another thing with being an early stage company, I think a good time to do an IPO is when you have solid news flow coming. So example for phase 2, or you're moving on to another phase. Because when you are an early stage life science company, there are certain times when you don't have anything to communicate. So how do you keep the market updated when you don't have any news to communicate? And that is a big challenge. But for example, yesterday when Biogen announced that they're going with a filing for aducanumab, the BioArctic stock closed up at 45%. So if there's anything happening around the market or your field that could be in your favor, that could drive interest towards your stock, I think you should act on that. So a good time is when you have solid news flow and good traction in the market.
You were going to add something, Benjamin?
Yeah, it's difficult to plan on other companies' deliveries, of course. So I think it's an extremely difficult task, because most of the biotech companies, at least in the Nordics, usually it's one asset, and then you add something just to have a news flow in a way. That's the base case. That's a usual. That's a very common situation, and I think it should be possible to IPO those as well. But then you need to prepare and have a much more well thought through PR and IR strategy to be able to talk about other things while nothing is happening in your project. But it's definitely a challenge. But since it's difficult to raise capital without going public these days. So I think us as advisors, if we can bridge that gap and be able to help companies with a firm IR PR strategy as well, not only financial advice, you have the right IR and PR people that actually knows the area as well, that could help. It's not about creating a story that isn't there. It's just about creating a buzz around the company and reminding investors that there's an asset there.
So very true. I would like to say that I think that BioStock has a good meaning to fill there as well. I mean, I would like to go on forever with this discussion because you have lots of interesting information to give us. However, we're going to have to round it up here, and we'll just say that you guys are available to all the companies that are here, so they can come to you and ask those specific questions in the next break. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ja, tack. Jag kan ta den där. Tack. Tack så mycket. So, Erik is already here. So all I'm going to say is now we're going to listen to Erik Kinnman of Neurovive Pharmaceuticals. Welcome, Erik.
Thank you very much. Good to be here. Good to have people on the web as well. I have two ideas in terms of what I will present to you today. One is, first of all, let me show you this one. My name is Erik Kinnman. I'm the CEO of Neurovive since about 3 years back. I will present two things for you today. One is our updated strategy, namely our focus on primary mitochondrial diseases, and the reason for that is that we have a high unmet medical need in this area, and we are also utilizing the advantages of these diseases being orphan drugs, and I'll come back to that as well. The second part of my presentation will be around our core programs and milestones related to that. So in terms of our core programs then, primary mitochondrial diseases, we have two programs. That is KL1333, which is in clinical trials. The second clinical trial is ongoing. 354 is a preclinical program moving into clinical program next year. And then we have two partnering programs. One is our Neurostat program for traumatic brain injury. This program has recently received an IND, so it's ready to start clinical trials in the US. It also has a fast track status and support of its clinical study program by the FDA and EMA. We're looking for partners for that program as well. In our first patient trial, which we reported recently, we had a pharmaceutical signal, and that program is because of that of high interest. Our 556 program is in preclinical stage, and we have the documentation we believe necessary to out-license that one as well, and out-licensing discussions are ongoing. We're listed on the Nasdaq Stockholm Stock Exchange, a market cap currently about 270 million. This is a summary of our updated strategy, a focus on the primary mitochondrial diseases, and in addition to the high unmet medical need, then the orphan drug possibilities, being taking programs faster to the market at a less cost, and also with a higher likelihood of actually succeeding. And once on the market, the prices on average is some 5 times higher. We have a network operational model, so we have a very focused internal group working with external experts and resources when we actually need them, and in that way we can work in a very cost-effective way. We have the intention also to build a very focused organization when it comes to marketing and distribution when we get closer to the market. And the opportunity for a small company of our size is obviously to be in this orphan drug space where these type of diseases, primary mitochondrial diseases, are treated by very few super specialists. As an example, in Sweden, we have the specialists at Karolinska, only a few there, and likewise in Sahlgrenska in Gothenburg. So we're focusing on the primary mitochondrial diseases. These are represented by KL1333, which is one disease group, 354, another. And then we have a couple of earlier programs. I would like to also point at the collaboration we have with BridgeBio in the US, who have started a subsidiary around molecules that they have licensed from us for one particular disease, ELHON, which affects the eye and gives rise to blindness. In addition to that, and the reason for why we have focused recently is progress in our portfolio. So we have too wide a portfolio to actually be able to take the programs further into development by ourselves. Hence the focus on the primary mitochondrial diseases. In terms of medical need then, these diseases are very severe. There are no alternative treatments. As an example, for Leigh disease, the average life expectancy is less than 5 years. Another disease that we are focusing on is MELAS, or the mutation 3243A to G, less than 35 years. If you look at quality of life, this is SF-36, one very commonly used quality of life instrument. On the y-axis, you have a percent, and that is 100% when you're completely healthy and happy. Obviously, in the ordinary population, you have people with handicaps, diseases, and so on. So the red line is not 100%. But what is very obvious that in this population, which actually are less sick than many of these patients with primary mitochondrial disease, there's especially a lower quality of life when it comes to physical function. For these patients, 3243 mutation, there is a prevalence of some 3.5 out of 100,000. The most common symptoms are fatigue, exercise intolerance, myopathy, diabetes, and deafness, cardiomyopathy, and what's a hallmark of this disease is lactic acidosis. Leigh syndrome is another disease that we're looking particularly on. The incidence is some 2.5 out of 100,000 of live death. Typically, the patients get sick at 1 year or 2 years after birth, and they have a life expectancy of a couple of years in addition to that, with very, very severe symptoms, with inabilities to walk and talk, with severe symptoms from other organs as well, leading to blindness and hearing difficulties, and also affecting kidney and the heart. Looking at the function of mitochondria, translating energy in food and oxygen into ATP, you find the basis for what's the problem with these type of patients. Normally, you produce NAD in the respiratory chain, the very complex protein chain that leads to ATP production and energy that the cell needs to survive. When the mitochondria are not functioning properly due to various types of mutations, less NAD+ is produced and ATP, the energy source. And our programs are designed to actually help in different ways. The KL1333 program will modulate the levels of NAD+, which actually increase the levels of NAD+. And NAD+ is a very important coenzyme in the mitochondrial biogenesis. Normally, mitochondria are turned over and new are produced as needed. This will actually rectify this, and we have shown in our experimental models that mitochondrial mass is increased by our drug. 354 is an energy substitution and will rectify the energy production by bypassing the mutations which are most commonly in the first step of the respiratory chain. Key milestones for our program: we have orally available drugs that are disease modifiers. We've done the first clinical trial for KL1333, and we're now in the second clinical trial, where we've done the single ascending dose with food effects. Multiple ascending dose in healthy volunteers ongoing, And in the beginning of next year, we will start the first patient studies with the aim of moving into an efficacy trial for KA1333 next year. For 354, again, an orally available drug, disease modifying. We have preclinical proof of concept, and we're doing additional dose response studies in experimental models. And we're in parallel preparing this program to move into the clinical development as well next year. So in terms of the competitive landscape we're operating in, it is quite limited. If we're looking at direct competitors, those are in blue. Stealth is ahead of us, and they have a phase 3 readout by the end of this year. They have a membrane stabilizing compound for one set of these type of patients with mitochondrial myopathy. But in addition to that, there are a couple of programs that are not looking very promising right now. So our main competitors are Mitobridge and Reneo, which have an approach also leading to increased mitochondrial mass. In terms of our programs, we are sort of head-to-head. That was my program, and time is out.
Perfect timing. Thank you so much, Erik. And then we welcome up the CEO of Xbrane Biopharma, Martin Åmark.
So hello everybody, my name is Martin, I'm the CEO of Xbrane. So this is a fabulous picture from where we were listed at Nasdaq Main Market earlier this year, and you see a large part of our growing team where we have experts within different fields of pharmaceutical development, which are now working heavily to prepare our filing for our first product in about a year's time. So we're getting closer and closer to filing our first product, which is very exciting for us. And what do? We develop biosimilars, and a biosimilar is, you can say, a similar thing to generic, but for biological drugs. So when the patent expires on a biological drug, we can enter the market and compete with a highly similar product, which is then called a biosimilar. Now you can see live what is happening for biosimilar in the market. Humira, the world's largest selling product, lost the patent protection last year, and you can see biosimilars entering the market. Sales have gone down in Europe with about 30% in just a quarter's time. So you can see the real effect of biosimilars competing in the market. And why? It's very simple. Looking at the UK, they expect to be able to save 150 million British pounds using biosimilars to Humira instead of the originator product. So what can you do with that money? A lot of things, right? You can invest in the healthcare, more nurses, more treatment for cancer patients. So the case is quite compelling to go with more cost-efficient biosimilars rather than the originator. And we see a lot of traction for biosimilars in the market right now. We as Xbrane stand stronger now than what we've ever have done. We are capitally strong. We raised capital during this year and had end of Q2 approximately 250 million Swedish crowns of cash. Now listed at main market Nasdaq with approximately 450 million Swedish crowns market cap. We've strengthened the ownership picture here. Our commercialization partner STADA, German pharmaceutical company, is now shareholder. They invested 4 million euro in the company, and we broadened our partnership around more biosimilars than our leading product, and also investors such as Swedbank Robur Medica and others coming in. Our leading product, we call it Xlucane. It's a biosimilar to the eye drug Lucentis. And we are in a phase 3 now with this product and expect to be able to launch 2022 as the patent in Europe expires. Partner being STADA, a German pharmaceutical company. We have a great deal with them where we split the profits 50-50. And we expect to be generating approximately 100 million euro each, Xbrane and STADA, annually from this product. And we see a lot of traction with biosimilars right now. It's probably the fastest growing segment in the pharmaceutical industry right now, 25-30% annual growth in this segment. So it's a lot of traction, and of course due to more cost-efficient products being preferred by payers and regulators. And then we have an attractive portfolio of preclinical programs targeting originator sales of some 11 billion euro. So we have a strong preclinical portfolio we're addressing as well. So then more words about the leading product, Xlucane. So biosimilar to Lucentis. And Lucentis is an eye drug treating patients suffering from several severe eye diseases leading to deteriorating vision. And the product is essentially injected into the eye, leading to a regain of the vision, if you will. And this is a big market, approximately 9.4 billion euro of annual sales generated by Lucentis and the drug Eylea, which has similar efficacy and safety to Lucentis. It's a big market, still growing with some 10%, which I think is due to that we have a pretty large untreated population out there. We estimate that only 2 million out of 18 million individuals affected by these diseases get adequate treatment. So this spurs further growth and also is why entry of biosimilars into this sector is so important. The path to market for Xlucane. We're currently then in a phase 3 trial, and this is from a design perspective, rather simple trial, an equivalence trial. We're recruiting 580 patients with age-related macular degeneration, one group being treated with the originator product Lucentis, one group being treated with our biosimilar, with the objective of demonstrating equivalence, primary endpoint being improvement in vision. And the first patient came in April this year, and we expect to have recruited all patients during first quarter next year, report market data back to the market mid of next year, and then being able to file and get approval towards the second part of 2021. And so far, the study is progressing according to plan, and in blinded assessment, we've seen no abnormalities with regards to safety compared to normal usage of Lucentis. So I think it's encouraging that everything is going along as it should. And we believe in this program, there's very limited technical risk. If you look at biosimilars that have entered into phase 3, 90 to 95% of them have come out on the other end with a marketing authorization. And nothing really tells us that Xlucane should be different. So there's a high probability that we'll get to market with this product, which I think is very, very compelling here. And we have a great commercialization partner in STADA. So this is a German pharmaceutical company, 2 billion euro in sales, 10,000 employees. They have 3 biosimilars on the market as of today. One of them selling for 200 million euro in Europe alone. So they've been commercially successful with biosimilars. And with the investment they did in Xbrane, they strengthened the partnership with us and are now looking into 2 other preclinical programs that we have under development. And from a competitive perspective, I think this also looks very good. We're targeting an originator molecule with 3.5 billion euro of sales, and there are 3 biosimilars expected to come to market, out of which Xlucane is one. And with the partnership with STADA, we're the only one with a commercialization partner in place for the product, and I think we have a great deal with them, where we are simply splitting the development costs, and in that, of course, also the phase 3 trial, and then splitting the profits. We can look at our peer Formycon in Germany, the deal they did. They're expecting to generate a similar amount during the whole lifetime of the product as we are in terms of market uptake. And you've seen some case here with 60% volume market share of the biosimilars on the first year, which is incredible. And this is just due to a higher confidence amongst patients and physicians for the biosimilars. And we have a platform technology which we base our development on, which has the benefit of low cost compared to standard technologies. And we base our further development of preclinical products on this platform, amongst them biosimilars to products such as Cimzia and Opdivo. So to summarize, we stand very strongly now financially, a great product in Xlucane, which is in late stage and have great commercial prospects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And next up, we have Fredrik Westman, the CEO of MedicPen.
Good afternoon. My name is Fredrik Westman. I am
the CEO of MedicPen. And can I have the controller? Ah, great. MedicPen, it's a medtech company located just outside Lund. And we solve problems regarding medication in people's homes. Especially we solve two problems. We improve adherence among patients who take medicines. For example, old people who are taking a lot of medicines. Secondly, we can improve efficiency in, for example, municipalities or elder care providers. I will explain more later. Our main product is Medimi Smart. We develop, produce, and sell connected health products, which, as I said, aiming to help people to take the right dose medicine at the right time. Plus, make elder care providers more efficient. What is unique with our system and our product? We separate handling of each pill, each single pill, until dosage, which provide elder care providers with a unique flexibility. And our product and system, it's integrated in healthcare IT environments. We are listed on Spotlight Stock Market, and at the moment the market cap is approximately 65 million Swedish kronor. And it is also a good investment opportunity, especially at the moment. We close our new issue of shares, new emission, on Friday. You're welcome to invest. Our vision and aims with our product, Medimi Smart, for caregivers, efficient handling of medication, decreased risk of medication errors, which is a huge problem today. For example, World Health Organization emphasize that 50% of all patients, they don't take their medication as prescribed. But also increased knowledge of medication habits, because everything that is happening with our device is there is logs, so everything is logged. For the patient, we know that medication leads to a lot of stress, not only for the patient but also for relatives. Increased adherence, and as a result, improved health, we hope, and increased freedom. With our device, people living at home, taking medicines, they are not dependent on elder care people coming home to give medicines. Our device do that for them. And here is our device, Medimi Smart, a dispenser in the front line. And as you see, there is on the left and the right one, the door is open. You see the cassettes. And the cassettes make this solution unique. It has a capacity of up to 16 different medicines. And each cassette, there can be 28 individual compartments. There are individual compartments which make the cassette unique, and it creates flexibility. It can give up to 16 doses every day. And as I said earlier, it's connected to the healthcare system, so the medication schedule, the doctor's prescription is downloaded to Medimi Smart. So all information comes from the healthcare or elder care systems. And it reminds the patient with light, sound, speech, and SMS when it's time for taking its medicine. And SMS can be sent to, for example, caregiver before the time slot ends. So the caregiver or someone else can call the patient or check what is happening. Why haven't you taken your medicine yet? A reminder can be set for injections or eye drops, etc. that cannot be stored in Medimi Smart. And one more unique thing with Medimi Smart, it can handle on-demand medication. You know, when some people, they get pain and need very special painkillers. Today, quite often, the elder care staff or people have to go home to the person to give the painkillers. With this device, it can be stored in Medimi Smart, and the patient can take it out on their own, with doctor's regulations, of course. And it creates logs for medication, and every single activity that is happening connected to Medimi Smart is logged, which gives us a lot of information, and caregivers, and so on. And this is how the system works. We have built up this system in Denmark, where we have made tests. You see, the doctor gives a prescription, which goes to a medical journal and then to the healthcare system or elder care system. But the prescription goes also to the pharmacy. At the pharmacy, they pack our cassettes with pills. And the cassettes are at transportation agency, pick up cassettes, transport it home to the person, the patient, and load Medimi Smart with cassettes. And Medimi Smart is always communicating with the care system. So what happens if the doctor changes prescriptions? Let's say the doctor says that to the patient, you should have 2 instead of 1 pill. This information goes directly down to Medimi Smart. Next day, it will the dispenser will give the patient the right dose. We have implemented and tested in Denmark, but also in Sweden, in the so-called TIM project, Total Solution for Innovative Medication. It's 9 municipalities in northwest Denmark, together with the IT company Falk Danmark, a pharmacy, and the Danish Digitaliseringsstyrelsen, the governmental institution. We finished the test a couple of days ago with really good results. And we have also made some tests in Lund, in this municipality, during this year. Markets and pricing. Denmark, Sweden, and Nordic countries. Denmark has been in our focus. Do you know why? Because they are in the front line of digitalization. So it's a really good opportunity for MedicPen to test this new device in this field. Next step will be US and Europe. And we think the business model will be leasing. But we can also get some revenues from system setup, cassettes, support, and because we have the opportunity to gather a lot of information. In the future, big data can be revenue for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, you could give that, just leave it there. She will take it. Well, thank you, Fredrik. And our next presenter is Surisha Adimateo, the CEO of InnoSense.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. The last presentation, I believe, and I hope I'll not bore you enough and try to keep it active. We are Innovasense. We are a team of people who believe in creating value-based solutions, both for the society and healthcare. I am the CEO and founder of Innovasense AB, and we are developing SMASH, Sweat Metabolite Analysis for Sports and Health. This is my father. I lost him in the year 2006, and the cause of his death was diagnosed to be type 2 diabetes. It is painful to see somebody go through extreme pain and not being able to do anything at all. It all began with his amputation with the finger, and it slowly progressed towards the left limb, and it went on and on. We wished and hoped for a better personalized medicine, but nothing was available. And now it's my turn. I'm diagnosed type 2 some time ago. That made me curious to understand what's causing my insulin resistance, and how is my disease progressing, how are my lipids and proteins and carbohydrates working in my body. Because I believe that glucose measurement is just a reaction to hundreds of chemistries. More than 90% of the total diabetic population are type 2, and 50% of them do not even realize they are type 2 because they do not have any pain or any other symptoms to tell them that they're early diabetic or type 2, unlike an arthritis patient who would have pain in some form. People are suffering due to lack of individualized and personalized medicine, and I think it's time to realize that type 2 diabetics would need comprehensive analysis of multiple parameters in order to understand the pathophysiology of each one of them. Each individual is different, so is the pathophysiology. And we have to find solutions to create better personalized medicines. We at Innovasense understand the need for individualized medicine, and we are using IoT and wearable tech as a means to solve this problem. I'm proud to introduce you to a solution called SMASH. This is underlying magic. SMASH is wearable, SMASH is pain-free, SMASH is multi-parametric, SMASH is a continuous monitoring device, SMASH comprises of a body-worn hardware and an app, and SMASH is a sweat sensor. The 3-layered sensor that you're seeing here comprises of the first layer with the electrodes and chemistries on it, and the second layer is the actual microfluidic sensor, which can collect sweat, measure multiple parameters, and replenish the sweat once the measurements are taken. The sensor can be worn on any part of the body, and it's connected to a little Bluetooth-enabled PC board, which will then transmit the signals to the app. Together with the hardware, we are also developing an AI-based app where we are trying to study the various multiple parameters and different permutations and combinations, like glucose, ketones, lactate, in relation to diet, medication, and exercise, which can help us understand the pathophysiology and help us create a personalized medicine for type 2 diabetes, which will, in the end, help the consequences in the prevention and postponement of consequences of hyper and hypoglycemia in the long run. This is a patent situation. We have recently filed a PCT for this unique way of collecting sweat, measuring multiple parameters, and replenishing the sweat once the measurements are taken. And we also have a couple of other patents on their way. We got into this because the market opportunity for this invention or the technology is immense. These are the numbers that are being spent by different parts of the world in trying to treat their early diabetic patients and type 2 diabetic patients due to lack of personalized medicine. And these numbers are expected to rise by another 30 to 50% in the coming years. And we plan to capture at least 1% of this market share in the coming years. This is a competitive landscape. On x-axis, I'm representing the trend which is moving from traditional glucose monitoring towards the tools to self-manage diabetes. In the left quadrant over here, these are some companies which are usually used by type 2 diabetes. They do not have any better medicine other than using the pricking devices. And they cannot create any personalized medicine. So they're not yet there. And on this quadrant, I'm trying to represent some app companies which are really doing good in the market today. They can bring in some amount of value to the patients if they're trying to upload the glucose values, the food intake, the medication they take, and everything. with all the due respect to these companies, they're still lagging behind. They cannot create, a comprehensive analysis, or they cannot help us understand the pathophysiology of a diabetic patient. And those companies up above are trying to move towards the trend of multiparametric measurements. But still, they also are behind, and they cannot help us understand the pathophysiology again, like these companies. So this makes us completely unique within this space, because we are truly non-invasive, continuous monitoring, and we can provide multiparametric measurements simultaneously. In addition to the device, we also have an app which can make a comprehensive analysis of various multiple parameters. So we believe that we can create a massive impact, not only within the fields of diabetes management, but also within the fields of health and wellness tech. Our business model is B2B. Through attraction, we have discovered that our sensors could also be useful for athletes who would need continuous monitoring of multiple parameters, especially lactate. That would help them achieve the peak performances. And we are targeting our minimum viable product, or the so-called beachhead, towards athletes as a strategy for us to get the first revenues and first customers while we're trying to get the diabetic device clinically approved. So we will do a combination of licensing and direct selling. And for direct selling, we will adapt the subscription model, where we will begin the sales with €250, which includes the device, a pack of sensors, and the app subscription. And then we will start subsequently charging for sensors and the app. Now, you might be thinking, why are we the right team to do this? We are the right team to do this because we understand the competitive landscape quite well. We have tried and tested every solution that's available in the market, and nothing works. We are a team of people who know how to build scalable solutions and turn them into profitable businesses, and we know how to drive marketing strategies to attract qualitative customers. So our team is a clever combination of science and technology. Most of the team members have been part of health tech and life science companies before, and I can explain in detail if somebody's interested. So far, we've been able to raise about 1.5 million Swedish in seed money and angel investments. We're pretty proud because we have secured EU Commission SME Instrument Phase 1, and also a couple of other grants from the region. We are very fortunate about those things. And we use this money to develop the first versions of app, sensors and electronics, and we are proud to announce that we have successfully completed a couple of rounds of bench testing, and we also finished our first pilot study during the month of May, which gave us substantial results within the wellness and fitness tech, the non-regulated application areas. And we've been able to secure 80 to 85% of accuracy levels, and we are quite proud of it. And after this, as a team, we brainstormed and decided to do something with what we already have at hand. And then, it was the non-invasive lactate sensor, which was more interesting to all of us. And we started discussing with some of these potential partners who could be interested in, using our sensors for their health wearables. And these are some of the partners who fell in love literally with our sensors, and they said, like, yes, this is amazing, and we would love to, sign the licensing deal if the sensors work like you claim. So now we are trying to produce the first set of sensors so that they can test and give us a licensing option. So, this is a big milestone achieved for us, but obviously we have a journey to do there. Now we are trying to raise about 5 million or €500,000 to give us a little marketing push, to scale the team, to develop the first set of industrial prototypes, validate them, and launch our MVP. And we are working with a clear strategic ambition towards an exit. Once we launch the MVP, we will take the device to the diabetic clinical approval process, and upon the achievement of CE and FDA, we will progress towards the exit, either through an IPO or a trade sale or a merger or an acquisition. We promise you that we will change the way people think about type 2 diabetes and personalized medicine. We will revolutionize the wearable tech and health tech market with a unique solution. We have a pain, we have a great solution, we have a team, and we have a traction. If you'd like to help us and join us in this mission of transforming the lives of millions of diabetic patients, invest in Innovisense. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, we're up to the last presentation of the day. And the honor of bringing us home goes to Danish company Saniona and CEO Jørgen Dreyer.
Yes, I'm Jørgen Dreyer, CEO of Saniona, and Saniona is a Danish company listed at Nasdaq Stockholm. And we are focused in the orphan disease space with the product Tesomet, and what we want to do is to bring that product all the way to the market. So the phase 2 data just came out a couple of weeks ago and looks very promising, and this is just a statement from the press release from our primary investigator in Hungary who really likes this drug. So we are in orphan diseases, and the management focuses completely on this Tesomet product in 2 orphan diseases. One is called Prader-Willi syndrome, the other one hypothalamic obesity. As I mentioned, we have already proof of concept in Prader-Willi syndrome, and we are now completing the recruitment in the hypothalamic obesity study running in Denmark. We have the opportunity to go all the way to the market here. It's rare diseases with small clinical studies and relatively small market need for market force. The company is based on a platform which has really delivered a number of partnerships and also compounds into the development. So we have partnered with Pfizer, with J&J, with Boehringer, and that has really paid all our research costs since the inception and also some of the clinical costs. But more than that, it has also delivered some programs into our own pipeline. So today I'll just talk about the Tesomet product. We'll not have time for anything else, and that is also clearly the most important value driver of the company, as I mentioned, in 2 indications, Prader-Willi syndrome and hypothalamic obesity in phase 2. We have other programs in the early development, and we have, as I said, a number of partnerships. I'll just mention the tesofensine product here, which is going towards the market. It's in registration phase in Mexico, and we are expecting royalties to kick in from that next year. Also, I could mention that on this program, which we formed a spin-out around some years back, still have an ownership in the company and also some royalties on the product. They are in phase 2 with that product, and just mentioned a couple of days ago that there are positive data from that, and they're going into other indications now as well. But back to Tesomet and to these 2 indications. Both rare diseases and both indications are about a complete lack of appetite control. So these patients have an obsession with food. They cannot think about anything but food. And that is actually life-threatening, at least in the case of Prader-Willi syndrome, which is the genetic disease, but also in this acquired disease, hypothalamic obesity, it is very severe. There is an estimated market opportunity here in the billion-dollar range in both of these indications based on analyst reports. So we are around here right now. I have just completed the phase 2A study here with very good results, and are now planning for the final pivotal studies, phase 2B and phase 3, before potential filing in 2022. And with the hypothalamic obesity, phase 2 running, but with a shorter development time, we expect there to be about the same time. So a little bit more about Prader-Willi syndrome, as I said, characterized by this obsession with food, which is, as I said, life-threatening, because 30 to 50% of the patients will actually die from accidents, and accidents through eating too much. They will choke, and they will have suffocation from eating too much. Their bowel will rupture. It's actually quite a number of the patients that die in a young age just because of accidents. Then, of course, on top of that, they will have obesity and diabetes and a lot of other complications because they get usually very big. So you need to control these patients all their life, and it's terrible for the patients, for the parents. It's not a very common disease, about 1 out of 40,000, and In Europe and US, it would be about 20,000 patients. But still, since we are expecting very high prices, or at least the analysts are expecting very high prices here, as usually is the case in such a disease, 100 to 200,000 US dollars per year in US. And since there is no approved treatment, we think it's a very, very interesting business opportunity for us, which will also call for small studies, short studies, and commercialization should be straightforward. So why does Tesomet work? Well, this is the mechanism of action, and we think it really fits exactly into the unmet need in Prader-Willi patients, because it works on the reward center and on the appetite center. And this is where the craving for food comes from. This is where the appetite control sets in. And these three neurotransmitters, which the compound increases the level of, they will all work in these centers and decrease craving for food, decrease appetite, and actually give an increased fat burn. We also believe that the Tesomet product is useful for long-term treatment because it's cardiovascular neutral as a combination of two drugs. And we have a new patent position on this combination going until 2036. So now to the data. We just completed this phase 2A study in Prader-Willi syndrome, and it has been running for a couple of years, but it has also been a study that we have learned really a lot from. It has been done both in adult patients and in teenagers and adolescent patients. It has been done with 3 different doses, and it has been running in some patients for up to 9 months and with shifting doses along the way, measurements every month. So we have a lot of data points out of these 18 patients that went through this exploratory study. And the conclusion is here. We have determined the right dose to be 0.25 milligram, where we both have a very nice effect on what we call hyperphagia, this obsession with food. We have a very nice weight reduction, BMI reduction, and it's very well tolerated at this dose. We have a plasma level, or a level of the drug in the blood of 10 nanogram per ml. And that is exactly where we want it to be, because we know from a previous study in obese patients that this is where the compound works best. At a lower dose, we didn't reach that target level, and also there was limited effect here on hyperphagia. There was some effect on weight, and it was very well tolerated. At the higher dose, which we studied in adult patients, we got up to very high concentrations in the blood and saw extremely nice effects on both these parameters, but also some of the patients didn't tolerate this well. So we have found the sweet spot here. I'll just very quickly run through some data slides. So we don't have much time for that, but just to show you the impressive data. This is on hyperphagia, which is a questionnaire that the parents fill out. And as you can see, during the study in these adult patients, this hyperphagia score went down essentially to 0. And that has never been seen before. These patients really stopped this craving for food. Some of them left food on the table, which they have never done before. Here, the placebo came back to about starting level. Also, there was a nice weight reduction in the study. This is from the second part of the study in the teenagers, in the adolescents, which was a little more complicated because it was first running as a double-blind with a low dose, and then continued at the same low dose for another 3 months, and then we shifted to the 0.25 milligram. And as you can see, the hyperphagia score went down to very low level, stayed down at very low level for 9 months, actually. Quite impressive. And when we looked at weight, this was similar. The 0.25 dose gave a very nice weight reduction. As you can actually see that the patients were growing. These were teenagers. They were growing quite a bit, both in the placebo group and also in the low dose group in the beginning in the first 6 months of the study. So they were both growing in height and also in width, of course. And if we subtracted or corrected for that growth in height, looked at BMI instead of a very long time, much longer than has ever been studied in these patients before, and still see a declining effect in the hyperphagia score. So this is a very strong data in our mind, and also it was very nice when our primary investigator, Dora Torak, came and visited us a couple of weeks ago. She said what she had seen in the patients, very convinced that this is a strong effect. And when the patients got out of the treatment, they took on weight, they got the hyperphagia back, it would be that one or that one that would continue into phase 3. So that will take a couple of years and should bring us to the filing. So the other indications, I will not have much time to talk about the hypothalamic obesity, but it's actually a disease where you get a damage to the appetite center, and then you get more or less the same symptoms as the Prader-Willi patients. These patients are otherwise normal, so you use the same dose as you would do in the normal obese population, so it's somewhat simpler. As I mentioned, we are doing studies now in Denmark, up to 25 patients, and we are completing the recruitment very, very soon now. Yes, I should be stopping now. I mentioned the Medix situation where they are filing now and hopefully get on the market next year, and we'll have a stable royalty income from that. And this is then just the lots of upcoming news. Some of them already completed